for a parking problem.
And for your 23.
Yeah, that's where I'll get a 28. Come on, truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Come on, truck, white Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up ahead.
So you had 2000. Patrick's faulting.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in the, something like that, I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle so they can remove it.
What? What? Rockingham 505. 505 ended up vandalism case for Athens. Complainant, soon to be ex, slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive that to 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. Look at that. No, 3 and Depot Street. Truck away at 35.
That was 435?
Down.
10-4.
You go 643 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had jump slightly down.
10-4, I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449, 1120.
And 449, 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Alright, we have 535.
Yeah, that was a great college.
535.
Should be. You guys know if our woman is plugged into the house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get in now. Still 5-foot longer here, got tie-dye shirt on, and number 21 is on.
We have separation. Excuse me. Hey guys, good to see you. I guess everybody must be busy. What, watching the Canton Board of Selectmen meeting? I, I have no idea why people would ever want to watch a Board of Selectmen meeting, but I don't know. It is what it is in this case, right? This is an unusual case that has made Board of Selectmen meetings really popular for some reason with a certain crowd. Anyways, so I got some things I want to go over tonight. Um, I had, so some people have seen a guest appearance on a show last night, Dave and Nurse Kim. So we're going to go over that. And I want to go over, we're going to try to replay the medical examiner testimony. So there's key parts of testimony from the Karen Reed trial that it's worth going back to because you're going to pick up things that you missed. And we're going to try to get through that because that was, maybe I'll play on fast speed. It wasn't very long though, so we should be able to get through that testimony. So I know this she was almost hostile, it felt to me, to the prosecution, which was really weird for a state's witness to do that. So let's go back and see. Maybe I've misjudged her, and let's see exactly how she played that out. And if there's little things to be picked up, somebody who I met outside the courthouse in Dedham a couple of weeks ago named Kara pointed out to me something that I had not picked up before or didn't remember anyways, and that was that John had broken ribs. Now, those broken ribs could have been from CPR or could have been from something else, right? So let's see if we can find out some more information on that. We're not going to get a perfect image. We're not going to get perfect clarity on John's injuries because they did not X-ray the body, which is actually turns out to be standard in the United States to not X-ray bodies as part of an autopsy, which is strange, but whatever reason, that's the standard here. They do normally X-ray them in Europe and in Japan, but I don't know. Apparently, we don't have the machinery or something. So now I titled this "Looking in the Mirror" tonight. This is something that I do try to do and have tried to do ever since I've launched the channel. Certainly since I've been doing lives, but very certainly since I've been embroiled in the controversy related to the Karen Reed case, right? There's so many aspects of it, right? So when I first began covering this case, I had never done a live show in my life. And no, that's not true. I had done some live shows on a sports channel before, but not counting that. And so, I didn't see myself, I had no ambition of doing it, didn't see myself as a podcaster or anything like that. Not even sure what I wanted to do with the channel, but I was doing shows, a series on the Karen Reed case called Framed. And I guess grifting in the extent that I understood that a conspiracy theory is always popular. However, it's just not my nature to stop asking questions or to report something that I know is not true. It's more than that. It's not because sometimes some of these other channels, it's not necessarily like they're certainly not aware, most of them, that they're not seeking the truth. It's their methodology. That's the problem. And that's why you have to be willing to look in the mirror. So, for instance, if you're Young Jelly, Mike Crawford, he's had his channel around for 4 or 5 years. It's struggling to get any traction. Suddenly he does a Karen Reed conspiracy case and he gets 7,000 views because he's all in on the conspiracy last summer. Well, he never looked back. He never asked an honest question after that, with the exception of one show in early January, which he has since removed, which kind of tells you all you really need to know about Mike. But this is not about Mike. I'm talking about just generally, if you're thinking of starting your own channel, if you're a journalist, right? I mean, are you covering things fairly? Are you mindful of the damage you might be doing to innocent people? Those are important things, aren't they? If you're pushing a conspiracy theory, are you mindful of what kind of damage that might do? Just pausing real quick for a comment in Discord. So people that become members of this channel get access to our private Discord, and they can ask me questions or make statements during the show, and I will, if that's what they want, I'll talk about it on the air. So this was just, I don't think this was meant for public consumption. Just they said they watched last night's show, and how do you watch tonight? Well, I don't know. I put the link. Let me just, okay. So you have to be questioning things, looking in the mirror, asking if what you're doing. See, anytime in life, if you're doing something that you gain from personally, those are the times you question if you're doing it the right way. It doesn't mean you aren't doing it the right way. But if your personal gain, your personal interest coincides with that thing you're doing, that's when you have to take a deep look and see, am I doing it for myself, or am I doing it because it's the right thing or the best thing to do? And I think this is something that comes up a lot in journalism and comes up all the time now in podcasting. Now, it's natural for human beings to be interested in mysteries, in the unexplained, the unsolved. It's human nature. This is why there's many series on this kind of stuff. It's interesting, and something that is mundane and ordinary is not interesting. And this applies to true crime too. So conspiracies are interesting, but regular, mundane suicides and ordinary hit and runs or whatever, those things are not interesting. So they're never going to draw. So if you know this, if you're a content creator, and the goal as a content creator is to get views, right? And it's a struggle. It's not easy to get them. But the easy way is to cover conspiracies, to cover the unexplained. Now, if you're doing it for Bigfoot or aliens and stuff like that, well, you're not really hurting anybody. If you're doing it on old cases like Jack the Ripper, you're not really hurting anybody. But if you're doing it on new cases, man, this is just, and I've seen this in the other true crime things that I've covered. I haven't covered true crime that extensively, but things like the Delphi murders, things like Brian Kohlberger, a lot of these cases here, there is a tendency for channels that report unusual things or conspiracies to blow up and suddenly get huge numbers. And so if your coverage is like that, you have to be very self-aware. Now, conspiracies do happen. Corruption does happen. Absolutely. There's false prosecutions, people that are in jail that shouldn't be. There are plenty of people in jail that should not be. There's no question about that. I actually, in the 90s, I watched a documentary on the Discovery Channel about the death penalty. And a documentary actually caused me to switch a lifelong support of the death penalty. It was one of those ones narrated by the old great Bill Curtis. But this was, 2-hour-long show that really showed me, they focused on one example in particular where there was some kind of a Buddhist temple where there was a slaughter. A bunch of innocent people were just slaughtered there. And so maybe this was Colorado or Arizona or New Mexico or something like that. It was somewhere out there. And they ended up with 2 Hispanic guys who had confessed to the killings. And they were sentenced and put on death row. However, it emerged eventually the real killer in jail confessed to the crimes. And it turned out the 2 Hispanic guys that they had charged with this crime and put on death row could not have even been in the area. They had absolute alibis. Well, why did they confess? Well, this is where you start learning about things that I had no experience of. Maybe you don't. Had no awareness of until I saw the show. But these guys had been under, I think it was like 48 hours straight of interrogation at the police station, where every hour a team would interrogate them and then they would get off and another team would come in. And this is why when they confessed, they even actually had details about the crime scene that only the killer could have had. How did they have them? Well, they got them from other police. So somebody comes in and asks questions and they're picking up little clues, and they're just under the strain and exhaustion and the sleeplessness where your mind starts to really fracture. For a brief moment, they believe they committed the crimes, and these were family men that had no history of anything criminal in their background. So it never made sense. But so to me, when I realized, and it wasn't necessarily that the prosecution set out with corruption, but there was enormous pressure to get convictions on this, and they get this tunnel vision when they think they got the right guys for some reason, and they use these kind of unscrupulous techniques. And then eventually, when they do get the evidence that should have told them that these guys were innocent, they ignore it. This happens a lot in prosecution in the United States. So I am someone that believes that conspiracies or false prosecutions do happen, and it's important to cover them. But that said, when you look at any particular case, you need to be careful and make sure that your own desire to see something that is more interesting, that is unexplained, that is more complicated, each one of us has our own personal desire to see something like that or something else. If you find something that you identify with about the victim, is that enough to make you jump to conclusions, right? Or it might be biases that we have. For instance, about the police, if you have had a bad experience with the police, or you've read about bad experiences with the police, or just whatever that goes into this stuff, you have to be really rigorous at looking in the mirror, especially if you're a content creator, but even if you're just someone that's an ordinary citizen that's interested in criminal cases. So along those lines too, we can talk about Sandra Birchmore. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the case. We covered that on this channel last fall. And, that case lingers with you as a really disturbing case. Because one thing there's no question of is that, well, there's more than one thing that there's no question of, but certainly one thing is that this poor girl, when she joined this thing called the Explorers Program, which is a program for her high school kids that were interested in future careers in law enforcement, she was, I think, 14 or 15 when she joined that, and maybe was the only girl or one of the only girls in the program. And these police officers, including the person who ran the program and then other cops under him, immediately began grooming her. Grooming is a real thing. Grooming is something that a lot of people like to ignore, depending on your political philosophy and stuff like that, but it's a real thing. And they were grooming these kids and taking advantage of, well, they were grooming Sandra at least. And eventually they took advantage of that. Whether that happened before she was of legal age, I don't remember if that's fully established, but at some point, even if it didn't, it's still completely disgustingly inappropriate to be taken advantage of. And there's nobody more vulnerable than this girl, because she had no father figures in her life. And then while she was in high school, she was being raised by her mom and her grandmother, and they both passed. So this, she was extremely vulnerable and beset by terrible tragedy. And just all she wanted to do was to be a cop. And so I think she was 23 years old when she either committed suicide or was murdered. Now, the last person to see her was the officer that had been grooming her, one of the ones for the longest time. And I saw that video. I saw that video for the first time when we played it on the channel. This is when I was still with Dave and Aaron, my partners back then. And we had played that video. And it was disturbing to me because it was clear that this guy, it shows him coming into the building and going up to the waiting for the elevator, and then going up the elevator and then coming out. And he was so clearly trying to avoid the cameras so that he wouldn't be seen. Now that's super suspicious, right? And he was the last person to see her alive inside. And then she was found sometime later having apparently committed suicide. Was that a suicide? Hopefully now the FBI and the state has made a priority in investigating this case, and I'm very happy about that. But I want us to be careful in the public and not rush to judgment. This is something that listen, it's a problem when the police do it, when they rush to judgment early on and develop tunnel vision on a case. That's what led to the problems in, I forget whatever that state was, where the two Hispanic guys that were falsely charged with killing the people, the Buddhist monks. But it's a problem with the public too. And you have to be careful. There's a tendency to want to believe. There's some part of our mind that, for maybe different reasons for all of us, but wants to believe in that kind of injustice. I can't explain why. I'm not sure why, but it's more than just that it's titillating. There's something else. Maybe it resonates with us because many of us have experienced some kind of injustice in our own life. I'm not saying with the police, but with whatever. And I think it definitely resonates with people who have been victims of abuse. So there's a tendency for them to almost want to believe that Sandra was murdered. And again, I'm not saying she wasn't. I really don't know. And you know, I believe she hung herself by tying a rope to the door or something like that. I forget. It's been a while since I've read up on it. And that is the kind of thing that could be a murder made to look like a suicide, right? So there's a lot of reasons to be suspicious here, but keep an open mind. It's very important to have the mental discipline to do that. Now, to me, if, as is perhaps a likely scenario, that cop came in, she was pregnant, presumably with his baby, although that was never established. If that cop came in and said, listen, you bitch, you know, he's married, this cop. He's got a family of his own at the time and still does. And if he came in and said, listen, bitch, stop calling me. I don't ever want to hear you again. Why don't you just fucking kill yourself and kill that child inside you? I'm not going to take care of it. It's not mine. And you're never going to be a cop. He just destroyed this girl's life so completely. All she ever wanted to do was trust in these guys around her. And all she ever wanted to do was be a cop. If he came in and said things so cruel to her that it caused her to kill herself, I don't know, that's worse than murder in some ways, you know, to make someone pregnant with a child at a time when she should be 23-year-old woman should be feeling hopeful about the future. Whatever he said, if it was so cruel to make her do that, to me, it's like that's colder than murder. But we have to just be careful to follow the truth. All right. There are going to be, as part of the law. Now, her family, and my understanding from a guest that we had that investigates this closely, I think her name was Mizzy or something like that, but she came on, she was very nice, and she's tried to keep the public attention on this case. And she had said that the family had pretty much ignored Sandra while she was alive and just didn't give a shit about her. But now they're trying to capitalize on it to win a lawsuit. And they're going to be able to go out and find experts, because I know some people might agree with me, but this does go on. However they manage to do it, defense teams manage to find experts to say what they want them to say. I'm not saying that they find experts to lie, but they find experts that have an incentive to want to give them analysis that will help them. And so I don't doubt there are going to be a lot of strange things, aha moments that come out of this investigation, because there are in every one, and defense teams are very good at manufacturing them. Look at the Karen Reed case. So back in that last September, that hair that was found on the fender, on the back panel of the SUV, the initial testing was not able to get sufficient DNA to do a match, or even determine to do a match, basically. And so the report said, I forget exactly, but no human DNA detected or something like that. It didn't mean the hair was not human. It never meant that. It just meant that DNA was not detected. And Alan Jackson ran with that and fooled people like Turtle Boy and his followers into saying, aha, it's a non-human hair. That's not what the report said. And you notice they didn't try that stunt in the trial. That was for public consumption. Now, that should make people that are in the Free Karen Read side, that in many other moments, should make them give pause and say, wait a minute. Am I being too eager to buy into defense team tricks? And that was just one. Another one was last June when Alan Jackson said there's a gap in the library video, implying that something was deleted that showed Karen driving by. That was all nonsense. Karen didn't go by the library going back to One Meadows. That's all we know. There was no gap. But remember the gap? The gap. If you're just following this case now, you might not be aware of it. But a year ago, there was the gap. And these are all the things that you don't hear about anymore. Where for a while, this was all on the lips of all the Free Karen Read people. But this is why I say you have to have self-awareness. If you're a Free Karen Read person, and so many of the things that were most important to you a year ago or 6 months ago are things that you no longer mention, but now you mention new things, have a little self-awareness and say, maybe I just really want there to be a conspiracy. Maybe I have some deep personal need for whatever reason for there to be a conspiracy. And you need to do a lot of inward searching to find out why it is that you believe that. That's just, and you have to do it not just because you want to be able to understand the case as best you can, but out of a sense of conscience. If you're participating in a movement that is smearing people that just might be innocent, right? Like there's not any evidence that connects John's death in any way to Jen McCabe, Matt McCabe, to Brian Albert, to Colin Albert, to any of these people. There's not one piece of evidence that shows any police planted any evidence. None. Now, I'm not saying I understand you don't want to throw that out the door yet because maybe it hasn't been found, right? Okay. But you should at least be asking yourself, all these things that I was quick to buy into before, and now I'm buying into something else. Maybe the problem is me. Maybe I'm being too quick because I really want to, for some reason, believe in this conspiracy. Whatever your reason is, it might be personal for different people, different reasons for different people. Someone like Rita Lombardi, this is her moment to suddenly rise up and become a prominent player and run for political office, right? Now, I'm not saying she doesn't at some level believe in the conspiracy, but is that belief self-serving at heart? And the only way she can find that out is by doing some deep looking inside of yourself, some introspection. That's what you need to do. And I think that's an important part of doing these cases. Now, I can promise you that I've done that and continue to do that. And we'll always do that for whatever it's worth. Another thing about that's a little bit troubling to me about trying to do a true crime channel, in addition to, obviously, there's always going to be this pressure to report the titillating, the conspiracy, the unusual, is that people are very quick to get upset with you if you don't 100% agree with their conclusions. And so maybe this kind of true crime YouTube world isn't really ideal for me personally, because it is just not my nature to just roll over and give people what they want just to make them happy when it comes to their theories about a case. I'm going to go through the process of asking questions all the time, rigorously. And so from my most recent episode, I talked briefly about the Ellen Greenberg case. And I made a point to say, and I've said this every time I've discussed that case, that I have not had the time to do a document dive. I haven't. And I've said, please, you guys do the document dive if you have time and you're interested in it. You can find every document on Gavin Smith's website. And you can bring me up to speed on things. And people have done that. they've shown me image. So I wasn't sure what floor they lived on. And someone got back to me and said the 6th floor. And I wasn't sure what that lock looked like. And someone got back to me with a photo of it. And I said, I'm not sure how I think it seems. Yes, Gavin Fish. Thank you, Frankie. And I said, it seems like to me it might be somewhat unlikely that the fiance would be able to lock that. It has an inner lock there that he'd have to go outside from the hallway and lock the inside lock. That it might be hard for him or unlikely for him to do that. And people sent me videos that showed where it was a little bit more plausible. So I think it was useful to discuss the case, right? And I said that I stand open-minded on the case, and we should be able to have that discussion. But one person messaged me saying, I'm canceling my membership, and I'll just watch your Karen Reed shows, but I don't want to support you anymore because I don't agree with you on the Ellen Greenberg case. And then even in my case too, some of my family members don't agree with me on it. But I say, I don't know the reality, but I'm going to raise questions because that's how I do things. And I think that's one of the few things in life that I'm fairly good at is coming up with good questions. And that's what you want to do, is keep coming up with questions. So in the Ellen Greenberg case, I brought this up last time. So a lot of people, I think the main reason that people just taking that superficial look at the case don't believe it could have been a suicide is because they don't think that someone could stab themselves 23 times. Most of those wounds were fairly shallow, but enough to cause pain. And so they don't think that somebody could inflict that amount of pain on themselves without stopping. And many of the wounds were in the back on the back and on the back of the neck, and one was in the back of the head. They were in spots that you could reach. There was no wound that was done that she couldn't reach. But people would rightly say, is that how you would do it? If you're going to kill yourself, would you stab yourself on the back? It seemed odd, right? So those are legit people that look at that. When you take that 10,000-mile view down, look at the case, and they say, would someone commit suicide that way? I have no problem with people that say, is that rare? Is that how people, that seems unlikely, right? That number of stab wounds. But I asked a question last week. So the boyfriend, the fiance who people think did it, I haven't seen any photos of him or anything, but he was powerful enough. Young guy, Ellen was 27, so I assume the fiance was similar age. He left the apartment to go to the gym. There's a gym inside the building, and was at the gym for a while. And then when he came back, and Ellen had locked it from the inside, or it was locked from the inside, and she wasn't answering her phone or answering shouts from outside in the hallway. So he eventually broke in the door. Now, it takes a pretty good amount of strength, I would think, to break in a door, right? I'm not saying you have to be Hercules, but it takes some strength. So this is a fairly strong guy at the very least. Now, when you kill somebody in that kind of way, so for instance, a lot of people thought back in the Lizzie Borden time that the fact that Lizzie stabbed her parents, or her father and her stepmom, so many times is an indication of a passion killing, a crime of passion. If you're just going to kill someone because you're robbing them, you don't need to do that. You stab, so if it was someone that broke into the house that wanted to get revenge on Mr. Borden or wanted to rob him, he probably might always, hack him a couple of times. But she was the people. So the Bordens were hacked with a hatchet so many times that people said, this is proof that this was a crime of passion. And Lizzie had some reason to be angry and frustrated in her life. So a crime of passion is committed by someone that personally knows you. And there was no other person that was found that could have had some animus against the Bordens. So this is probably one of the main reasons that people think Lizzie Borden, Lizzie Borden was found not guilty. And I did a series on that, and I found it interesting because it's a true mystery in that it doesn't seem like somebody else could have been the suspect, but at the same time, or it doesn't seem likely someone else could have got in and out of the house during this period. But at the same time, the murder weapon was never found, and help was called for very quickly after Andrew Borden was killed. So, and Lizzie managed to somehow clean herself up so that nobody found any blood on her person, in her hair, and these were gory crimes. So, who knows what the truth is? But I'm not going to relive the Lizzie case right now. But the point is that crime of passion, multiple wounds. That's something what people usually link together. But here's the other thing about that case. Each one of those blows was considered to be enough to be fatal in the Lizzie Borden case. So this is, if you're going to hack someone to death, or if you're going to stab someone to death in a way that it's a killing frenzy, it's a crime of passion, you're in a rage against this person, it strikes me as more than probable that each one of those wounds, each one of those blows is going to be extremely hard. So if the fiance, again, I'm just speculating here, and I'm just asking this question so I don't, people get mad, but this is how my mind works, okay? If the boyfriend was going to stab her 23 times, so that would be a passion killing, right? That's a killing frenzy. Wouldn't each one of those be a very powerful thrust that did a tremendous amount of damage? Right? I mean, look at Nicole Simpson. Her head was almost severed. Violent blows, blood everywhere. That's not what the Ellen Greenberg case looks like. Most of those wounds were non-fatal and were shallow. They are, so then the next thing you would do is, all right, so you've got to weigh evidence, right? So on the one hand, you have 23 wounds and many of them in the back of the neck. And so you say that seems unlikely for someone to kill themselves that way. But on the other hand, you have the fact that these are all relatively shallow wounds. So isn't it also unlikely that a young, powerful man doing a passion kill like that would do shallow wounds? Doesn't that seem unlikely? So maybe you call that a wash, right? Maybe you sit there and you say, this is a wash. Both these things seem kind of unlikely. It seems unlikely that this person would kill herself that way, but it also seems unlikely that somebody else would kill her that way. So then what do you do? Well, logically, one thing you might do is begin to look at other cases and see if there are any similarities. For example, are there cases where a man killed somebody in a passion crime like that with a knife, but where the majority of the wounds are shallow? Because maybe there are, right? I can't tell you. I don't know. Maybe there are. Maybe that's a way of torturing someone. I don't know. And then if you can say if this is a way of doing slow torture to someone, then you can ask. You can go. This is how a logic tree works. You can ask an offshoot question from that. So if you decide that the only way someone else could kill her in that way, leaving shallow wounds, is if they were torturing her. So then you look to see, are there some other things that might suggest that he was trying to torture her? Right? Those are just questions that you might ask. It's a logic tree. So there are spin-off questions on each one of these things. But the way it is in true crime, the mere fact of asking these questions gets me in trouble. This is how I got in trouble with Karen Reed. Let me just take a quick sip of coffee. I'll take a glance at chat. Thank you guys for being here. And thank you, as always, Tom Fleming, for maintaining the best chat, the most civil chat forum in the world. Oh, Andy, I didn't see that. Thank you. I just saw that. The always great Andy Dufresne. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So this is how I got started with Karen Reed, right? So I was covering this case with the series called Framed, and then eventually doing lives. It was awesome because a team developed around me, and I liked the people. I really liked working with Dave and Aaron, but also some of the other people in the group. We had Tom with us, and it seemed it's very difficult to get a channel going. Now, when I say get it going, I'm not talking about a huge audience, but just making it feel like it's worthwhile, like you're doing something that people enjoy or is achieving something. That's hard to do in YouTube. It's hard to do in life, I guess, right? But it's hard to do in YouTube. And so a year ago at this time, it was a year ago at exactly this time. In fact, I think it might be almost exactly a year ago. Oop, had a little flash there. Might be almost exactly a year ago that I had my so-called outburst episode with Turtle Boy. Let me just get a little warm in here. So things were looking good at that point. If that was a movie after a time of struggle, this is the midpoint. A year ago was the midpoint of the movie. That's what's known in many movies as the false victory, where the hero seems to achieve everything she wants at the midpoint. However, things start to unravel, and then within a few scenes of that, it bottoms out. It hits the bottom, and that's called, in movie talk, that's called the all is lost moment of the movie. So we hit that false high here for me personally, but I think maybe for the other people about a year ago. And it was also about a year ago that Sean gave us the big scoop that tied together the conspiracy theory in a nice little knot. I kept asking questions about motive, and he finally gave me the big breakthrough. And if had what he gave me turned out to be true, it'd be the kind of, breaking news kind of thing that investigative reporting thing that you dream about, right? And I never dreamed of being a reporter, but it would be the kind of thing that even a New York Times reporter would say, wow, that's a truly incredible thing to break. So for that brief moment, we were on top of the world, but then it all came crashing down. What Sean fed me turned out to be false, completely false. People in the Karen Reed side didn't like that I was asking questions about the conspiracy theory. And so the mob was starting to form internally. Well, the mob had already formed, and the mob did not tolerate anybody asking any questions. And so they were turning on me. And eventually I lost most of my team, and definitely the channel bottomed out, so went through that pathway there. In fact, let me look at Sean's. He did a reply. Let me pull it up here for you guys to the last time. On the last show, we talked about that story that came to us through Sean. So he says, it looks like our friendly bartender is at it again. Even though he has his own live stream as proof, he still wants to connect Karen Reed to me as the source about John O'Keefe's call to the CPD. Well, just to be clear, I have no inside information that says Karen Reed was the source. That's speculation. I speculate on that based on the pattern of what was going on where she was taking true things and calling them falsely into the narrative in order to try to create that third-party culprit. So she did this with the Ring video where Karen and John were woken up by some kids at night that were hanging out on the lawn. She falsely inserted Colin into that narrative. That is known. That she did do. She reported that to Gretchen Voss, Boston Magazine writer. So not long after that, I get this story from Sean that Karen was sent out to film a drug dealer on their street corner, and that it was Colin, and that John called the police about this. Now, there are other parts. I've been trying to correct this ever since, right? So So Sean says the source who told me about John O'Keefe calling the CPD was the detective who answered and took the information from John. I can tell you this is false. Now, Sean may or may not be telling the truth about this in terms of whatever. I don't know what his actual source is. There was no phone call. John did not call the Canton police to report this. He reported it in person to Kevin Albert, who he knew. And there was another detective that worked there that may be the source behind this. He no longer works there. I'm not going to say his name. He does not have a good reputation in the Canton police at all. And the story doesn't seem to be true, but certainly the fact that Colin was said by Sean to be the one that Karen Reed filmed, we know is not true, because we know that film is in Discovery, because all the messaging that went between Kevin Albert and John is in Discovery. So Karen could have used it in the trial. Karen has that video, she took it too. And if that video was of Colin dealing drugs, she absolutely 100% would have played that at trial to show Colin's motive and the Albert's motive, right? So it's not Colin. In fact, we know the name of the person who it was, and he's a 27-year-old man. Not Colin. It's continuing, Sean. He says, John called the CPD in mid-March of 2021 and spoke directly to my source. No, he didn't. My source has also given a lengthy interview to the investigative agents with the FBI. All right, this is really interesting. This is very, very interesting. Why would Sean know that? Now, presumably from his source, right? But this source was clearly not honest. But with the level of strange federal collusion here, it's possible he knows this from the FBI. The FBI has been strangely acting, or at least a couple of members of the FBI, as part of Karen's propaganda team, working with her social media contacts, including Sean. We know the FBI agent's name. So, no, this is not true. There are multiple live streams of me telling this information. Ironically, the bartender was the first to air it. Yes, but all of it came from Sean. And the way I approached it was I scripted it out because I wanted to be able to choose my words carefully to make sure I didn't make a mistake. So the night before, I scripted out the entire episode, and I was going to read from that word from word. And that's what I ultimately ended up doing, but read from it word for word so I didn't make a mistake. I took that script the day before and sent it to Sean, and he approved it enthusiastically. And I have the messaging for this. So there's no sense denying it, Sean. I'm not going to be like you and put this on the air, but if I get subpoenaed, I have not destroyed those messages. So keep in mind what you're saying. You don't want to say things that aren't true. You approved it. The next day, I wanted to make sure, because this is a big story, right? You got to get this right. So I tweaked the language ever just a little bit, and again sent him to him, and again he approved it enthusiastically. Until about an hour before the show, he had cold feet, but not about the Colin angle. He had cold feet because he had also told me as part of that he had a current DEA agent who had told him that there was an active police investigation into drug dealing in the Canton Police Department. And he told me that he didn't want to jeopardize his source in the DEA by reporting that. So he never walked back at that point any of what he had been telling me for a couple of days. Not a word of it. He only became squeamish, he said, because he didn't want to expose that agent. So we walked back a little bit more of the story. And then I went with it. But then overnight, Sean got a lot of flack from people saying this is bullshit, particularly Turtle Boy. And so Sean wanted to come on the show the next day to correct the record. But no, what he in reality wanted to do was come on and pass the buck on to me. But I scripted those shows and I didn't vary one word from the script. So there's no way out of it. Everything that I reported came from him and was approved by him. Every period, every syllable of that report, every syllable that's proven. I emailed him that message. It's in the emails now. You can't delete it, Sean, from your end. It's in my sent folder. Your replies are there. So I'm sorry, buddy. You can either have the integrity to come clean or not. It's up to you. I really don't, I don't want to say I don't care. I'd rather you do the right thing. I don't want to say I don't care. I do care. I want you to do the right thing for the innocent people you smeared, but for yourself, dude. You're a Catholic boy. Confession does the soul good. You're not going to live forever, dude. Now, I'm not a religious person. I don't know if you are. You were raised as a Catholic. Do you believe that there'll be a time when you meet your maker? Well, consider the damage you've done here with these smears. Now, if Karen played a role in that, come clean. Now, I don't know that she did. But like I said, in addition to that pattern she established with the other story, we also know that at this very time, Alan Jackson went on national TV and said that John went into a situation that was tense and that he was set up. Now, that's consistent with this whole effort to try to create a scenario where the Alberts were trying to control or get back at John for complaining about their drug dealing nephew. It's all fiction, but it tied it together finally, right? And it seems that Alan Jackson on some level was in on it. So I believe Karen was, but again, I'm stating here, I have no evidence to say that she was. I'm not, I can't prove it, but Sean can prove it. Now, I do know also for a fact that Karen has lied pretty regularly to people like Sean and Turtle Boy and others. They know it. They don't want to tell you it because they've invested so much in this. It's the whole sunk cost fallacy kind of thing where it would be too embarrassing for the truth to come out for them now. But it's going to come out someday, Sean. I think you know that. I guess you're just going to ride this out for a little while longer, but the truth is going to come out. Generally, the truth does. And there's too many people that know about this shit. It may even eventually come out with Karen herself, if she works out some kind of a deal. I don't know. Who knows? But it will come out. Best if it comes out from you. All right, let's go to the appearance on Dave. The show is called Dave and Nurse Kim. And while I'm lining this up, I will tell you. So I've had communications with Dave Cullinane. I'm not sure how long, but going back many months. The communications kind of come and go, but they've always been polite and cordial, and I respect him. And he has always come across to me in those messages as someone who, yes, wanted to believe in the conspiracy, but also was trying to get to the truth earnestly. That's always been my impression. Now, I think Dave Cullinane works or has worked. I don't know the whole thing, but as a producer for Kirk Minihane or something like that. I don't follow it that closely, but I can say in the early weeks or months of my conversations with Dave, I didn't know that because I communicate with anybody that reaches out to me looking for evidence or polite civil discussion about the case. I talk to them. And that's so, And all my conversations with him were polite and felt that way. So at some point later on, so he's launched this new channel here, and he asked me to come on yesterday. I didn't even know the name of the channel. I didn't know how many shows they had done until after the show. I looked at this to see this was the second show. Nurse Kim, I had heard the name. I couldn't really associate it. But then afterwards, I did just stumble across. I saw that going back to look at last week, one of the court dates that we were looking at early in I don't know, at some point during the trial, we wanted to rewatch. I forget the one. Maybe it was Dr. Wolf. I forget. It was something that we all watched together here on the channel. But as I was watching it, I noticed in the trial replay that she was commenting in chat. And from the comments that I saw was respectful. I didn't see anything. So I'm told that she is a free care and read person and has been for a long time. But beyond that, I had no reason to think anything but good thoughts. Oops. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Let's see. All right.
When I first was getting into, feeling out my feelings, I was more middle of the road, right? And I liked his opinion because it would always be a counter to I was like, okay, and very fair, very, very fair. I think that it became not very fair, and I can talk to him further about that. About 3/4 way through the trial, after Proctor was up, then I couldn't get on board, but I'd be happy to have that discussion.
Right. My biggest question to Kevin, because he likes to use this term all the time with some of the creators, is does he think that Nurse Kim and Dave are grifters? Because I'll tell you right now, if you do, Kevin, I haven't made a goddamn cent off this damn thing, all right? So that's all I care about. You ask whatever questions you want to ask, but I'm just kidding. Let's bring him on.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, how are you? Kevin Lenahan, Yellow Cottage Tales, join us. First of all, thank you for joining us. And second of all, are we grifters? You got to answer the question.
The fact that I'm here answers that question right there. Okay, because this is the problem. I've reached out to the other people since day one. They have no interest, not just of having me on. They don't want to have anybody on that might give a contrary opinion. Pretty much every single one of the other channels. They don't ask any questions. Dave's been communicating with me for, off and on for the last year. And he's always had good questions. And he has been sincerely trying to get at the truth. And I've seen some of Nurse Kim's comments going back, looking at the old and the Yellow Cottage Tales during the trial. So I saw you comment in there. So you were watching back then at some point.
Yeah.
So again, just to repeat, some people may not like, or Dave may not like, or maybe he's just having a little fun, me calling grifters. But if you're going to pursue the conspiracy because it's going to get you views, well, here's the problem with that. And I'm not saying these guys are doing that. And the way I answered this here is no, if you're having me on, someone that has a contrary opinion, you're seeking discussion and debate on it. So, to me, at least if you're doing that and you're trying to get to the truth, then you're not grifting. So, but just my definition in terms of other people, though, is if you're not trying to get to the truth and you're trying to exploit the public's thirst for conspiracy, and you're willing to exploit the destruction of the lives of innocent people, or at least people that you don't know that are guilty of something, just because it'll get you clicks and views. This is what Young Jelly does. This is what Turtle Boy does. This is what the Glare does. This is what LTL does. This is what Sean does. This is what, if that little weird dude Dylan, if he's still around, that's what he does. This is what these guys do. They never have once asked a question about the conspiracy, ever. Little Jelly there, Young Jelly, the one episode where he disappeared for a couple weeks, then came out and said he was going to try to cover this case more fairly the rest of the way. He said he was going to ask questions. He never did. He saw the crowd turn on him. He got a threat from Turtle Boy in jail, and that's it. He took down the video. I went to go look for it recently so we could watch it. It's taken down. So, I mean, that's not only grifting, it's obviously it's pretty plainly a coward. There's no way you could even look in the mirror and say you're not a coward when you take down a video the way you promised to look at both sides. And you have to take that down because you don't want it to be known that you might look at both sides. What the hell? Who takes down a video like that? That's why I started calling him Young Jelly. He literally has no spine. He is a human being like an amoeba that walks around with no spine. That's what happens when you don't have the courage to ask any questions. So I'm not accusing Dave and Nurse Kim of that, and time will tell. Are they willing to pursue the truth? Pursuing the truth doesn't just mean you convince yourself that you believe in it, because anybody can convince themselves to believe in something that's to their benefit. So no, you have to have a more rigorous thought process than that. You have to do that kind of soul searching where you say, not just is this something, all right, not just do I believe in this, but is it really supported by the evidence? Is there enough there to justify me accusing people who are not charged with a crime and there's no evidence of a crime? Is there enough there for me to accuse them? Is there enough there for me to participate in a mob that is trying to destroy them? And at this point, there's no way anybody that follows this case can't be aware of the tactics of this mob. So.
Yeah, I mean, all I want is for people to at least care about the truth and try to ask questions from both sides.
Right. And so before we get into the crazy kind of details and your specific opinions on specific scenarios around this case, I just want to ask you, now that we just from a looking back standpoint, what are you like from your perspective, what disappoints you the most? Like, what did you read during this case, or what did you see, whether it be in the trial or whether it be, something with trial based, not internet? I think the internet disappoints you, just the way the family was treated and some of the other stuff. But from the trial perspective, because one of my biggest things, and it played out on a national scale pretty much, was the investigation. And to me, it was so flawed by Canton Police, Massachusetts State Police. We put a billboard out for the world to see, in my opinion, how not to do an investigation for a fallen police officer. That's my biggest disappointment. After you've watched it, what would you say is your biggest disappointment?
My biggest disappointment is actually with the prosecution, not so much with, and I understand, I'm sympathetic with the fact that Adam Lally had to take on all of this by himself. He had to question all of the witnesses, an enormous amount of material to master. But despite having bulletproof evidence that Karen struck John O'Keefe, they didn't present it in a way that was going to be clear to a jury. And they better do that next time. So I wasn't surprised by the result.
So it's kind of funny too. There was this person in chat who kept saying over and over again that Kevin is a paid lackey of the prosecution, even as I said stuff like this and made other criticisms of the prosecution. But I don't play it that way. And look, there are people that are on quote unquote my side, on the anti-Karen side, who get mad at me for saying stuff like that. But I'm just going to always call it the way I see it. And if it turns out to be I'm wrong on something, fine. I'll correct it. But I'm always going to do my best to call it the way I see it. And I guess that just has the effect of over time pissing everybody off. But I did not find, no investigation is without its flaws. I believe that. So for example, there are some really well done investigations. And I do think that the police in the Brian Kohlberger investigation, from what I've seen so far, did an outstanding job. But even in that, the police spokesman made ridiculous statements the days after the murders, saying that there was no danger to the public, blah, blah, blah. We believe it was a targeted killing. That's crazy. And that didn't turn out to be true at all. And it was always crazy. And he actually had to walk those statements back a couple of days later. But other than that, I think they did an outstanding job there. But in every other case that I've looked at, there are flaws in the case because sometimes you have an all hands on deck approach to these cases. You have multiple people coming in doing a divided labor of tasks, and there are going to be imperfections. And then there are also things that really aren't flaws in the case, but can be made to look like it later on. So, in the Karen Read case, I definitely have not seen any signs of corruption. Not one. And in terms of a bad investigation, obviously it doesn't seem like it was a good idea to put the party cups with the blood samples in them in the snow, to put that in the garage near the vehicle. I don't think they were near the vehicle for long. I don't, but is there any chance that could have contaminated the vehicle inadvertently? I don't, I don't think that that's likely, but I think it's probably a bad practice to do that. And, I obviously think that it would be important to secure a crime scene. So at best you can. So that day, the Canton police should have had a cruiser sitting there all day. That just seems standard, and they were actually gone by 8:30. So I understand it's during a blizzard. Nobody wants to sit there changing a shifts, blah, blah, blah. No, come on. You're not going to have a lot of murders there, and or deaths like that. You have a death where it's a Boston cop. There should have been a cruiser sitting there all day. Are there any other things that they did wrong? I don't think there was ever probable cause to search the house. I know from a common sense standpoint, people might say, well, you found a body on the lawn. But every lawyer I've talked to has said that there was not legally probable cause. So then the next thing you could have done was ask for permission to search the house. And we have to be realistic and say that was probably never going to be likely when you have a Canton police officer, Lank, who does know the Alberts, and Kevin Albert is a detective for the police. And those kind of connections are going to make it unlikely that they're going to ask for permission to search the home of a fellow cop too. Just like cops get, if you're a cop and you get a speeding ticket, you get pulled over for speeding, you pull out your badge. There are certain perks that go with the job, right or wrong, they just do. And it's human nature for that. So could they maybe have asked? It just seems unlikely to expect that would happen anywhere in the country, in the world. I mean, in a situation like that, where there was no reason to think something happened inside the house, would it have been better off if they did? It just, yeah, and it would have cleared the Alberts by now too. So I'm sure they wish that it happened. But I don't think it's a sign of this terrible investigation, to call this like completely inadequate or, corrupt or anything like that, just because they didn't investigate the house. I don't see it. There was no evidence that there was a fight inside the house. Everybody said that John had never went inside the house. So maybe if there was some witness that said they saw John in the house at the time. So I don't know. I don't think there was much probable cause there. You can look at other little things. Now, what about the state police? I do think that the CERT team should have done a more thorough job shoveling out the scene. It looks like they only shoveled out about roughly about the size of 2 parking spaces. So they had 7 people, and that's all they did. They should have really shoveled out a much wider section of that yard to look for pieces. They only searched there for an hour, less than an hour. They were done by 6:22. That seems lazy. That seems inadequate. So, little things like that. But I don't see anything that really impacted the investigation. Is it unusual that Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan didn't go to the crime scene that day? I can't say, because, we look at crimes like this and investigation of crimes the way our knowledge of it is from watching TV, fiction. And so we see the investigators go to the crime scene, right? Because it makes sense. But when you look at the way an actual investigation works, there's an extreme division of labor, and they're each just kind of doing their own little assigned thing that they've been trained to do. It's very kind of routine and methodical. It's not like there's this quest for the truth like we see in a movie or in a TV show. It's more just each person does their part. So you have the CERT team comes in and digs out the crime scene. Meanwhile, Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan are starting to organize. They're doing witness interviews that day. Then they're interviewing the suspect. you would think that with the crime scene only 5 minutes away, they might have had a curiosity to go there, but I think these things are just so kind of routine for them. Not that this killing was routine, but their approach to their job is just routine, that they're just lining up all the things that they had to do that was assigned to them. So after the CERT team, at some point, the chem team, the criminologists, will come in and go over that vehicle and look for any evidence. And then you have the cars team that will come in. That's Trooper Paul and any of his people to investigate the vehicle itself. So you have this very compartmentalized thing, and everybody's just kind of doing their part. Trooper Garino did the investigation of John's phone and of Jen McCabe's phone. He did because he's the data guy. And he was also involved with some data stuff at the scene too, but he's not sharing his information or coordinating it with Trooper Paul. Seems strange to us, but it's just seems to be how these guys work. It's just very compartmentalized. So that's my thoughts on that. Let's go back to Dave and Kim.
As far as the investigation, I mean, every true crime case that I've looked into, investigations are pretty flawed, because you got a lot of different people from different ages.
The consequences for this crime. And I would have liked to see, no matter if Proctor, if Mass State Police, if anybody had thought that, yes, it's pointing in that direction, I would have liked to see a methodical, crossing all of our T's, dotting all of our I's, and going in the house, just if they had done things, Kevin, then I wouldn't have a leg to stand on, right? If there were certain things done in the beginning of this investigation, then I couldn't scream from the top of like a rooftop saying that doesn't make sense, because it would have happened if it was any other one of us in the community, in my opinion.
Okay. See, I mean, we're not that far apart on that, where I think that the fact that 34 Fairview was the home of a cop absolutely, possibly, it certainly made it less likely that the home was going to be investigated. Would it have been investigated if it was someone else? It's really, really hard to say. I don't know. And at the end of the day, I don't think it made a difference in this case. Yes, had they done that, I guess in hindsight is 2020, right? So, but neither myself nor Dave nor Kim have any experience of doing these investigations. So we're looking at it for a really kind of distant and sometimes unfair way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, they got the evidence that they needed. And the bigger problem was it just wasn't presented in a clear way by the prosecution.
Did you want to go on, Dave, or do you want me to just answer that?
The only thing I was going to say back to you in terms of, because I definitely disagree in the sense that there were some flaws in my opinion. It seemed almost like they this goes to obviously the people who believe that there's a cover up and the police are involved and all that stuff. It seems like they did everything in their power to make it look like that was their plan if it was not their plan. Does that make sense? Like the idea that Canton police immediately basically became conflicted out of the case, right? And then where are we going to bring the car? Oh, we're going to bring the car to the Canton Police Department Sally Port when they had other options. To me, it's like, that's so basic. And it's so like from an investigative standpoint, like who thinks that's a good idea? Or do you just think that's so minor that it's really not a big deal? I think that feels like a big deal to me.
But like a lot of things, that was explained during the trial. So the car was covered with snow and ice. And before they could investigate that, you don't want to be scraping snow off,
right,
for evidentiary reasons. So they had to bring it to a heated garage, and that's not what they standard had. But the Sally Port in Canton did have that, and they didn't testify in this trial. But I downloaded a booklet that showed that standard procedure nationally is to bring the vehicle in an accident like this to a location closest to the scene, because in many cases they want to bring it back out to the scene. Now, I know they didn't do that here until the trial, but it's somewhat standard procedure. As far as the
So look at Kim's face. She's like, I hate to say it, Kim. I don't mean to. She's got that free Karen Reed face where she's just like doesn't believe what I'm saying. I don't know if she thinks what I'm saying is not the truth. I don't know. I mean, so they explained in the trial, I forget which trooper explained it, that was the reason they took it to the Sally Port, because there was a heated Sally Port and the state police garages were not heated. The defense did not challenge that. They didn't find any reason to say that that's not true. So I'm not sure if Kim doesn't believe that. And I did find a booklet but like I said here, these troopers didn't testify that that was the reason they did it. But I did, before the trial, find a booklet that was kind of a standard operating procedure for accidents. And it was standard. It is standard or recommended. It's recommended to bring the vehicle back as close to the crime scene as possible. So if needed, they can bring it out to the crime scene, which is something that they very commonly do. I don't think they did that in this case. They brought it out during the trial for the jury. But you could see Kim she's just, even though I'm giving her the answer that's true, but it's not what she wants to hear, so she doesn't like it.
Investigation generally, and I'm no expert at this, but just in the other criminal cases that I've looked at, I agree with you that a huge problem seems to be in cases where they've got it wrong and there's many innocent people in jail. The problem is a rush to judgment, right? And then once you make this decision too early, you get this tunnel vision. So if there was a situation here where John was killed inside the house, then that rush to judgment would have resulted in them being less likely to find it. So I agree with you. There are some problems there on that. Although they did not have probable cause to go inside the house. And I think in reality, they got it right. This was a simple hit and run case with a lot of other stuff that got stirred up by the defense team over time that looks really suspicious, like the Sally Port issue, but most of it really has been explained away. And that's what
Kevin,
we have to really.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I was just gonna ask you if you think that this is just a simple hit and run, a simple hit and run. It just happened, but why did Lally and Morrissey decide to go for second degree?
Well, if you had a lawyer on, they'd give you a better explanation. But there are the three prongs of second degree, but in general, you're looking for malicious intent. But malicious intent doesn't have to be I made a decision to kill John. There's all kinds of
forethought, yeah.
So one part of intent could be I made a decision to step on the gas in reverse for 62 feet when there were people in the area. So technically, that does satisfy. Now, I think practically a lot of jurors are not going to want to send someone to jail for murder for that, and then there also is the issue: when did she know that she did it? And during that time, she could have been calling 911. So she called her parents at 1:10. She called her parents at 4:40. She called her parents at 4:42. At 4:45, she wakes up the niece screaming. At 5 o'clock, she calls Jen and says, "My taillight is broken." And she calls Kerry and says, "John's dead. I think he's been hit by a plow." So by that time, she had a good sense of what happened, but she didn't call 911.
But you're referencing.
Yeah, but that's us assuming that, though. That's us because there is no evidence of that, right? And we can't just go by our feelings. Like, by her doing, yes, there are actions that you would say, oh, that doesn't make sense to me, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense in Karen's world, right? And because there was no proof, and because as much as it was alluded to that when Karen was out driving at 5 o'clock in the morning, that it was a large of the Commonwealth supporters side stating that, she drove by and she saw Officer John O'Keefe. That was kind of part of the theory that she had seen him there and then she left, but that never even came out from Guarino, although they did do the satellites, right? And say that she was close to this one, but she was also there. I feel like they would have 100% made that correlation had there been 100% bulletproof evidence that occurred.
So I'll play the answer for that in a second. I just want to say, not sure if you can see here. It looks like I'm wearing the same shirt, but I'm not. One of these shirts is dark blue and the other one is dark gray or something like that. These it's the same brand of shirt. I had a few of these shirts, but they're not exactly the same shirt. I want to say thank you to Kerry for the donation. But Kerry, I should be giving you the donation because Kerry so I am knee deep now in a book on this case. and I'm really pressuring myself now to get it out before the trial. And so there are a lot of details that would slow me down in terms of spelling names and who has how many kids and what age and stuff like that. And so Carrie's helping me out with that. So I should be paying Karen. I mean, I'm sorry, Karen, Jesus, Kerry. I should be paying Kerry the $20. So I'll have to find a way to do that. But thank you. I appreciate it, Kerry.
Yeah, there's definitely not. So, you know, we knew her GPS was off. There were indications of that, but it turns out it had been off for weeks. So there was no intent there. And I think you're right that proving beyond a reasonable doubt that she knew that she returned to the scene of the crime, I don't think that happened at all. And I never really thought that you were going to get a conviction on second degree. However, there are other questions too. Are there ethical obligations to the family to let the jury decide that? Because the jury, as you see in the trial, they're the decider of facts. So you give them the evidence and let them decide it. But I never thought there was probably going to be much of a chance of them getting a conviction on second degree.
That's up. Do you carry, we've said this on our lives, do you carry a lot of weight in her words that morning where I hit him, all the emotion that she, in my opinion, I believe it was natural emotion. Like, that's just my opinion. I understand how other people take it the other way. I would wake up that morning after a bender or whatever and be like, I did this, I did that. What did I tweet? Did I go live? Did I hit him? Did I, like, that's my personality. I know a lot of people like that. So I never really truthfully carried a lot of weight in the, did I hit him? Did I not? Does that factor into yours? Because I know it factors into a lot of people's.
I 100% agree with you. And I said this to contexts that I've had, with the investigators going back to the fall. And I said, if you're going to put too much emphasis on her statements at the scene, you're going to lose. I said back then, you need to get an accident reconstructionist that provides a convincing theory to a jury, or you're not going to win. And so, because we don't know what Karen was thinking when she was saying that stuff, and we don't even know exactly what she said or how she said it. I don't suspect any kind of, deliberate colluding on the part of the first responders, but it's natural to go back to the station and over weeks talk about, you're sitting in the station, you're talking about what you heard, and just unintentionally influence each other. So we just don't know. To any witness statement, I've taken this even just on witness statements in any case, if you don't, any statement that's not backed up by more sound physical evidence, I put on a very lower value. Now, that said, it does still have a value when you combine it with all the other evidence. But by itself, no, I would definitely not put that high up, and I wouldn't convict her on that.
So Kevin, I know a lot about you because of, like I said, I definitely liked your channel, just and not a problem to hear from another side. I've never been covering or anything that there was such like vitriol that I will.
And so, I do want to add here. So yeah, if she does seem to be doing this, and it's important. So from what I understand, and you can kind of see the reactions, and just from what I've heard, Kim is very strongly free Karen Read. Yet she was willing to go watch my channel at various points of this, even during the trial, and get my opinions on it. So this is what's important to do, is to seek contrary opinion to your own, whoever you are, whatever, all of us have to do that, and especially information about a case. And in a case like this, listen, you may not agree with me. That's okay. But I think everybody following this case understands that I have lived and eat and slept this case for over a year and dug very deeply into it with sources, covered the trial, watched every part of the trial. And so nobody has mastered every single piece of information in this, probably not even Adam Lally or Alan Jackson. But I definitely have mastered a lot of the information just because of the time that I put into it, and then the way that I've been trying to wrestle with those questions for a year. So just like, for instance, during the trial, when it came up that the Sally report was heated, that was the first time I had heard that. But I knew that was a big question on people's minds. So right away it clicked in my mind. So I think that So what she's doing here is good. Seek opinions from the other side.
Feel online, like anytime I go on Twitter, like everybody just wants to rip you apart, and that's totally fine. That is what it is. But for somebody to just have a difference of opinion, this shouldn't be like as hot as it gets in this case, in my opinion. I want justice for Officer John.
I disagree firmly with you on that, Kim. I think if reality is, if you believe that there was a cover-up for a fallen police officer, if you firmly in your gut believe that happened, why would you not be passionate and legitimately? That's where I know a lot of people we talk about her, right, but that's what I'm saying. I could understand if you hated somebody that thinks that Karen Reed did this because you believe that there's an entire orchestrated plot at.
Again, so I don't disagree with Dave on this, but what I think he's maybe. What I would say to him is there should be some caution about this. So people that sign up for causes, like let's say political causes, so on one side or the other, right? That's a right in this country. It's important, but it's also people that join up for causes. Sometimes it's because they just want to belong to something, right? They want to believe in something, or maybe it's sometimes I'm not going to go into a link because I talked about it earlier in this, but you may believe that Karen Reed is a victim, not because of your evaluation of the evidence, but because you just have these general feelings that police are corrupt, or the system is corrupt, or the system is going to victimize somebody like Karen Reed. So, for whatever reason. Now, I'm not trying to invalidate your feelings, but if you're willing to go out and accuse innocent people, you should have more than just feelings. And now I guarantee that if I was to take any single one of the people in the pink armies out there and ask them questions, they would have more than feelings. They would have feelings, but they would obviously be able to cite certain things about the case, whether it's the ARCA guys or the non-human hair or whatever. But the thing is you have to be able to do that inward looking to try to decide if you're just justifying, you're just rationalizing your feelings by selectively choosing evidence. And that's a personal thing for everybody, but just everybody has to look inward. And I suspect that a lot of people don't. And that's, and it's when I suspect it, it's not based on a feeling. It's based on what I'm seeing, that people dismiss sound evidence in favor of bits and pieces of random evidence that sound odd, and so I think that we need to do a better job in the public of weighing things, whatever it is, and trying to go down these logic trees and to try to evaluate what is possible and what is impossible. And so if you can show that it was impossible to tamper with that taillight, then it really doesn't matter if you point to other odd things in the case like butt dials. That stuff is irrelevant. Now, if you can't establish those timelines, then those odd things can become meaningful. But you have to be aware that a lot of times odd things are just odd things. And they're things that, in this case, most of them have been explained at this point. So we saw in this, we just explained why the car was towed to the Sally Port. There's a lot. So there are other things that'll never be explained. Why was there butt dials? We don't know. We'll never know. Are they just real? Butt dials, like accidentally dialing someone, is a real thing. I do it 5-6 times a week. There are also real reasons that people might want their phones legally destroyed, not want their communications read. And it has nothing to do with anything criminal. It has to do with embarrassment or whatever. We don't know. Now, if people are destroying messages, which that was not shown here, it was shown that maybe There was no urgency to destroy messages. If there was an urgency to destroy messages, those phones would have been destroyed many, many months before anybody requested them. So if Brian Albert and Brian Higgins had suspicious things on their phone, wouldn't they have destroyed them in the coming months? But they didn't. They didn't have any indication that anybody wanted their phones until September of 2022. So 7 months after John's death. So they had plenty of time to legally destroy their phones, get upgrades, lose their phone, drop it in the water, drop it in the sewer, and say, I don't know, I lost it. They had plenty of time to do that. And they didn't do that. So now that doesn't by itself eliminate the conspiracy, but you got to start asking all of these questions here.
Play that you should hate anybody who disagrees with you on that, because at the end of the day, that caused the death of a Boston police officer. That's what I always say is like Turtle Boy, and we always do the disclaimer, like you may not like how he says it and what he does or whatever, but like he's truthful when he says like, I don't give a fuck who you are. Like I believe that they did this to John O'Keefe in that home, and if you disagree with me, like he hates you, and he proves he says things about the family. He doesn't give a shit who it is. That's
all right, Dave. This was the low point of the show for me. I still like you, buddy, but come on, dude. You're just kissing Turtle Boy's ass in the hopes that he comes on your show. Let's just be honest about it. Because at this point, everybody knows what Turtle Boy is and how he's covered this case. You're justifying him attacking John's family. Come on, Dave. Jesus fucking Christ. You're doing that just so he'll come on your show and bring you new subscribers. Let's just call it what it is. I forgive you for it. I'm not holding it against you. I know you're a nice guy, but that's what you're doing here. All right? Because Turtle Boy, we're not going to go into a link, but let's be on. If you don't understand what Turtle Boy is, no, I know you understand what he is. All right? He's not just hating people that oppose him on this. First of all, he's not truthful. All right. If you think that he cares about the truth, no. And I came up with a question here that I'll go into the second that I responded this year. But Turtle Boy could care less about the truth. Turtle Boy is about himself. And this case was his big opportunity. The only extent that Turtle Boy cares about the truth is that he doesn't want to be shown to have reported something not truthful because it ruins his reputation as a journalist or whatever he is. So he's using that as an excuse to attack the victim's family, to try to destroy anybody that asks questions, to smear them with falsehoods, to lead an organization that in a very organized, systematic way tries to destroy anybody that opposes them using any means at all. When I say oppose them, I mean just try to destroy anybody that asks questions. That's because that's what they do. There was a woman last year that was a hostess in the Dedham area who posted on Facebook that she believed Karen was guilty. And that organized mob tried to destroy her. They called in hundreds of false complaints about her to the restaurant just for saying that. So I don't ever want to hear anybody, I don't want to ever hear any Turtle Rider say that Turtle Boy stands for free speech. He's the last guy. He stands for his own free speech. He wants to destroy anybody who speaks out in any way that he disagrees with. Or in my case last year was just asking questions. Came into my chat and accused me of both sidesism. That's what triggered the outburst. So come on, Dave. This is what I say. You get into the whole grifting aspect of this case. You come to a moral crossroads repeatedly when you're covering something like this. Will you do the right thing, or will you do the thing that's best for your channel? And where there's a difference in those two things, that's a moral opportunity to do the right thing. Because here, the right thing to do is to criticize Turtle Boy for what he's doing. That's the right thing to do. And I think you're a good enough kid to know that, Dave. Howie Carr is not. Howie Carr is a buffoon. I read Howie Carr for many years and respected him, but he's just totally grifting on this case. And so you guys people like this may not like the word that I use, but you're not pursuing the truth. You're pursuing your own interest. Turtle Boy is not after the truth.
That's like fundamentally what he believes. And I'm not saying I would react that way per se, but I can understand the thought process of somebody being like, I hate the people who disagree with me on this because of what it led to.
It's the corruption. I get where you're coming from. It's It's the corruption of it all. Yes.
Like, you're going to take shit. You're a content guy. You're going to take shit.
And there's been not one single evidence of corruption in this investigation. Nothing. Nothing anybody can point to. There's just this general feeling of it.
Have an opinion like that about, basically a fallen police officer when other people were involved, especially a case like this. Even if you don't think they were a part of it, there's some things that just look weird, whether you draw it up or not. Like if we're like butt dialing this or making a million calls or getting rid of our phones at very timely like opportunities, it's looks
too many questions. It's too
right.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're gonna defend those people who did that thing, like you gotta imagine somebody's gonna call you an asshole on Twitter. It's just gonna happen.
Let me ask you a question. Just if you do you think if Turtle Boy at some point got evidence in the last year, so the original story broke on April 18th of 2023.
Yep.
If he got some evidence in the last year that showed, whoa, maybe you're not going in the right direction, what do you think he would do?
So I know what you're alluding to, by the way. However,
I don't.
And I'm not even talking about that specifically. I'm just saying, just generally. We know what we're talking about, but I'm talking about just generally. Let's say he had enough evidence to realize. Because a lot of the claims that he made that were important to him have been explained.
Right.
The idea, like I talked to him on the phone last year, and he said the main reason he believed that.
So this is what goes to the heart of it. If Turtle Boy a year ago, 13 months ago, 14 months ago, had he discovered evidence that showed him this conspiracy was now maybe not true or probably not true, right? What would he have done? Would he have gone to his audience and reported that evidence? Is there anyone that believes that? Does Dave Cullinane believe that? Is there anyone that believes that Turtle Boy, if he found some piece of evidence that showed maybe there was no conspiracy, that he would have gone to his audience to report that? The answer is no, he wouldn't have. And it's clear. Last September, when the report came out from the state, one of the documents, that they found microscopic taillight pieces on John's clothing, I said on my show that Turtle Boy, who was going live later that night, he's not going to mention it. He's not going to tell his audience about that. It's a key piece of evidence. It's very hard to imagine the planting of microscopic taillight pieces. It's not impossible. Maybe Michael Proctor goes around with a little test tube of invisible pieces. I don't know. But it's hard to picture, right? And sure enough, Turtle Boy did not report it on his show. But someone having watched my show at the end of the show, when Turtle Boy takes questions, said, "Hey, what about the microscopic taillight pieces?" And he just had the answer. Trooper Proctor obviously planted those pieces. Like, there's no thought process here. It's just automatically, it's stupid. You just automatically throw this shit out there. Like Trooper Proctor is planting microscopic taillight pieces. Of course. This is why I say there's no interest in getting to the truth. Turtle Boy has no interest in getting the truth. That same show, in that same report, it came out, the GPS that showed that John's phone at least had never gone in the house. But Turtle Boy didn't talk about that either. In fact, when I reported that to Sean went quiet for 2 weeks. Sean thought it was over. Now, later on, he eventually managed to convince himself. I don't know what he convinced himself, but he managed to get around that. But the GPS really does show that John's phone didn't go in the house. And that's a hard thing to get around. And there's a whole bunch of aspects of this that are just super unlikely. But none of these guys asked this question. Nobody in the Free Karen Read movement. And this is what I really want to do, is just get good people, like I assume Dave and Kim are, to think a little bit more solidly, to weigh evidence a little bit better, and to do that thing that might not be in their best interest, but is the right thing. That's hard. You're trying to get a new channel going and they want it to get views. The way to do it is not by following me. The way to do it is by following the conspiracy. But is that the right thing to do? Are you sure? And I don't know. I can live with, at least if you're going to give it the court TV, both sides kind of treatment. Okay. But I don't know. Come on. You know what Turtle Boy's about.
That there was a conspiracy was because the Canton police did not find taillight pieces at the scene, but the state police found it later. But that's explained now. I explained it to him on the phone back then, but now it's there's more evidence to confirm it.
But Kevin, it's not I get what you're saying, but it's also not explained. Really, like realistically, I understand what the Commonwealth had said.
She interrupts and gets frustrated here, but it's because she doesn't understand what the explanation is. And I explain it. The question is well, whether she'll accept it, because she already has strong feelings on the case. And so she isn't going to want to accept it. And I get that. But you have to be more rigorous. You have to be willing to be wrong. Now maybe, and you'll see here, I give the explanation. I've given it to Turtle Boy. I don't even think Turtle Boy says this anymore. This was Turtle Boy's main reason last year. He no longer says it. He's outgrown this reason, even though that it was his main reason last year, because he knows.
Understand what Canton Police Department said. I get Saraf, Mulaney. I covered every single day of this. I watched this. I know all of the pre-court documents. And here's the deal: is that had they found one piece of taillight in the morning at 6:07 a.m. when they responded to that scene at the beginning of, well, yes, okay, let's say it's between 3 and 4 and 5. I don't know how many inches of snow. Men never tell the truth about how many inches. So I don't know exactly what I don't know exactly what had happened. But when the sun had come up, and yes, it was not. It's clearly it's a blizzard. It's
obviously just a joking around. I would never talk about anybody. I would sound like even back in the day when I was dating, like you'd go into a bar and talk about something like that. So it's just a joke, but at least I made her laugh, and I give her credit for that, because that's the idea: is you want to try to not be enemies just because you disagree on a case. But here's the thing: Nurse Kim thinks she knows all of the key evidence because she's read all the documents and she watched every day of the trial. But this is why you should listen, because I was able to give her, if she was open to it, a deeper understanding, because there are things, because I've looked at this case longer. I'm not saying I'm smarter than Kim, but maybe because I looked at this in a more both sides kind of way for longer, I had an insight watching this much earlier that my insight had come when I had talked about this with Turtle Boy over a year ago, or almost a year ago on the phone, but didn't know if I was looking for the actual confirmation of that. And it was there in Officer Sharaf's video. But Kim didn't catch that because she wasn't looking for it, because she hadn't thought about it as thoroughly as I have. That's just the truth.
It's a bad day, but it was still light, and it was still the least amount of snow. Had there been one piece of tail light that was found by Canton, she did it. You got it. Because I know exactly how you feel about, and you've gone through it methodically with the 414 when when the Lexus was picked up, and then taken back to the Sally Port. And yes, you're like, oh, there wouldn't be enough time. But Kevin, it still wasn't found till after it was at the Sally Port.
Yeah, but I can explain it to you though, like Kim, and I was looking at this at the trial. This was the explanation I gave Turtle Boy, but I didn't know for sure until I saw Officer Sharaf's dash cam video. So if you look closely at it, what you'll see is a plow bank that is, I don't know, it's hard to tell. It's not big, but maybe it's 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet or something like that. And also Lucky testified. He gave away the truth. David Yannetti asked him, what time did you last plow Fairview? and he said 5:30. This has to be the truth, because if you look at the ring video of the driveway when Karen leaves at 5:08, this what probably about 2 inches of snow there, maybe an inch and a half to 2 inches of snow, right? And that's about, Lucky has said in other interviews, you really don't start plowing until you get 2 inches of snow. So he probably started plowing around that time. Those taillight pieces were buried in that plow bank. And so when the Canton police got there, the snow around John's body had not accumulated because of the body warmth there. That's the only area that they searched. So the taillight piece, they never were going to take a shovel to a crime scene that automatically reverts to the state police. There wasn't a conflict thing. This automatic, with the exception of Worcester, Springfield, and Boston,
Yeah.
every town in Massachusetts, if
Goes
there's
to
a
Massachusetts,
suspicious
yeah.
death, unattended death, this is the way it goes, it automatically goes to the state
Right.
police. They were
Yeah.
never going to take a shovel to that crime scene, and they were never going to find those pieces without a shovel. So, and the
But
trooper,
Kevin, they took a leaf blower, man. Like they
was
took a
brilliant.
leaf blower, and we saw the video of the leaf blower right around.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and that was like proud of that. They were proud of that because they were improvising and they were MacGyvering it. They were doing what they
Yeah.
needed to do in a situation in which they had not typically come upon. Correct.
Mhm.
So I'm watching Gallagher methodically, layer by layer was his
Mhm.
exact verbiage, layer by layer, pulling that, blowing
Yep.
that snow with
Yep.
that leaf blower. But we didn't find one piece
Right.
of red taillight.
Because they weren't there. Most of those pieces were plowed up in the snowbank, and the other pieces were scattered a little bit further away, but they weren't going through that snow. They just looked around that body. Now, one thing that didn't come out in the trial, because they couldn't have asked this question, this is something you guys are like, why were they?
So this is I was able to give him, you could tell she's getting frustrated, so I wanted to give her something positive here. So I went into the blood drops a little bit, but this is the thing, is I don't know if she's able to really, if you're really determined for there to be a conspiracy, you might not see it. But there's no way those Canton police they only searched around the body. They didn't shovel anything. Most of those taillight pieces were scooped up by the plow into that bank. Now, there were some other little pieces that were scattered randomly around, but they only searched around the body where the snow had not accumulated, and they did take the leaf blower to a little bit of snow around the edges of that body, but that's not where the taillight pieces were. And Trooper Paul had explained pretty well the debris field that was established from the collision of John with the taillight. And so John was 15 feet away from that collision. So there's no indication on the map that Trooper Paul showed where the pieces were found. There's no indication that any of them were found in the same location as John's body. The cocktail glass, yes, because that was in his hand. And he was launched back and it stayed with him. So even if he released it halfway there, that glass still would have gone more or less to the same location. The phone was found underneath him because that obviously, more than likely came out of his back pocket. But even if it was in his hand, it also would have gone to that location. So we can't say for sure because you have that same angular momentum that was put on John's body when he was struck midsection. So this is the problem. I think these issues, had they got the explanation for them a year ago or 8, 9, 10 months ago, it wouldn't have allowed this conspiracy to have cemented itself in for so long. So what happens is, at this point, now that you get the explanation, instead of saying, it's too late, because they're already committed, certainly Kim is committed to the idea of a conspiracy. And she just doesn't really want to hear explanations, even if they make sense. And I don't mean this as a shot at Kim at all. I mean, it's human nature. It's very difficult once you've locked into a position for a while.
They picking up those blood samples there.
Why were they picking up blood samples?
The ones that they collected in the cups. Yeah.
The ones in the solo cups.
Yes.
Because
yes.
I don't know why. Because
There's
it was
only one
blood.
reason. No, like if you have a hit and run on the street in front of you, right? They're not going to collect the blood. There's no reason to. You want a blood sample from the victim, you can find it inside the body. The only
Yeah.
reason to collect the blood is if you're thinking it might belong to someone else.
Yeah.
And they couldn't say that. See, Adam Lally couldn't ask that in the trial because then the next question from the defense is going to be, well, if you thought it was from someone else, why didn't you investigate the house?
Right.
But clearly they collected that, and then the state police by then they just threw it out. They didn't even look at that blood. They testified. They just threw it out. The reason was because by the time the state police were there to pick up the evidence later on, they knew it was a hit and run, and so they had no interest in that blood that was in the solo cups. It was in the solo cups.
There's not a part of you, even in reading some of the reports early on, that read that and said like they didn't find any taillight pieces, and then all of a sudden like Berkowitz shows up, and like there's not a part of you that at all thought that was strange at any point during the
Sure.
process?
Sure, and you have to weigh all of the evidence, and you're never going to completely eliminate all of the odd things, but you try to tie up the ones you can, like why did it go to the Sally Port? And then at the same time, you're looking on the other side for evidence that is either indisputable or really, really powerfully probable. So like I've gone over the timeline. This is a two-sided coin in many ways in this case. So either Karen did this or there was a massive planting of evidence. And the question of the planting of the evidence, this was the thing that.
So maybe I think there's about 10 minutes left of this video, but maybe we've seen enough. And so I can go to the questions and talk to you guys a little bit. I do want to just show the very ending of this because it was kind of funny. So Kim does talk. I'm going on memory here, but I remember Kim talked she works as a nurse. I don't know what type of nursing she works in, if she works in a trauma unit or an ER or anything like that. She did not find John's injuries to be in any way consistent with being struck by a vehicle. And what I wanted to ask her, but because sometimes they hit you at multiple points, you can only address one. I wanted to just say, look, I don't have any expertise in that area either, but from everything that I've heard from talking to root cops who come across a lot of accidents, is that it's amazing how different each victim is. Sometimes, I mean, I talked to a guy that was saying, I came to a 12-year-old girl that was dead, had been hit by a vehicle, and she looked like an angel, like there was not a mark on her, but she was dead. Other times it's gory and gruesome. So it's just going to vary all the time. So I think so I'll just go a little bit to this here. I see.
I mean, the middle of the back of your head to the right.
Right.
That doesn't make sense either, because it should have been every part that had touched would have had significant trauma impact from the.
Okay. So, I mean, I listened carefully to this, and I in no way diminish her questions, because we all have questions, these injuries. And we hoped that we would have a very, very, very convincing theory at the trial, and not so much, right? The medical examiner, I'm actually not going to go over it tonight because it's getting tired, but the medical examiner, didn't left us wanting, and Trooper Paul left us wanting. So maybe we'll get a better explanation at the other trial. But this was, I had sent him the bulletproof timeline that I made up with the help of Chick from the Bricks.
That when Karen Reed
And we'll go to that in a
was
second.
charged, when she was arrested, and when she was arraigned for the unaliving of Officer John O'Keefe, nobody had the Toyota TechStream data. They didn't get that until February of 2023.
February of 2023. So at that time, that's when the ARCA guys were doing their research. And they would have known, these guys were specialists in that. They have on their website an article saying how we can get data from TechStream that might not show up in the black box report. They have
Yeah. So we've seen, so the contract with ARCA was from December 2022. So presumably they would have been initially sent their, the initial information from the feds at that time. And Kim has said that the TechStream data wasn't made available until February of 2023. I don't know that. I don't know how she knows that, but let's take her at her word for that. Let's assume for now that she's accurate. And this, the feds, the ARCA guys would have been saying, "Where's the tech stream data?" Because they're experts in tech stream, and there was no black box incident report created here. The EDR, I believe it's called, because the collision was not between two heavy objects, so it wasn't detected. So they would have known to ask for the tech stream data, and they would have. And so I don't know how long that they were experimenting here, but their reporting went all the way through early in this past year. So they definitely had time to get that information from the feds and the feds get all their information from Karen's team. So is the explanation because Karen's team didn't turn this over to the feds? But all of it's suspicious. If you're the ARCA guys, you know that tech stream data is going to exist. And if they're not giving it to you, you're going to wonder why, if you're honest, if you're trying to get to the truth. But they weren't hard to get to the truth. So we'll skip past that. So this was, I think at one point Kim had said, well, look, if I had video images of the accident, then I would believe it.
For instance, ring photographs or video showing the accident. But there is something just as good. There really is. And maybe you can put it on your website. I sent the image to Dave earlier.
Oh, you want
to? So I took the effort of getting all of the data from documents. This is not in dispute. This is data from the documents.
So I'm not going to bore you guys with this because you've heard it many times. And so I had put together this timeline, and the actual image here was made look much better than my original image by Chick from the Bricks. Thank you, Chick. And this timeline chart is probably going to be appearing in a documentary that I am not allowed to mention. So that's all I can mention about it. I don't even know if I can say that. Hopefully it is, because it's pretty convincing, and it's all data taken from the documents. So let's get to the very end of this where they say goodnight, because this is the part that makes me laugh a little bit.
And deeply hope for justice for Officer John O'Keefe, and I believe right now myself that does not include convicting Karen. But however the justice system will pan out next time, we shall see. And I hope that there is justice.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. And civil discourse like this is really the only way to eventually get to the truth, if the truth is the goal, right? So
right.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And let's just keep asking questions and stay open to whatever evidence comes out now.
All right, Kevin, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye, Kevin.
See you, Kevin. All right. That is Kevin Lenahan, Yellow Cottage Tales.
So you see this here? Look at this. She does this like huge exhale and dives back like like it was a torture to have to discuss this case with somebody from the other side, or somebody that had a contrary point of view. I'm not trying to be negative, Kim. I'm sure you're not watching this show, but if you do, I like you. I like Dave. I like that you're willing to come on with me. We can have these, if the truth is the goal, we can have these kind of discussions. I was polite. I don't think, let's replay that little look that she did.
All right, Kevin, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye, Kevin.
See you, Kevin. All right. That is Kevin Lenahan, Yellow Cottage Tales. And Kim, there's moments there where I just sat back because I didn't know if we were going to get lightning on a bottle. I didn't know if we were going to get Kim going off. You were on your best behavior. I respect it. I respect the hell out of it. All right, let's put.
So best behavior. I mean, this is the other thing. And she kind of said something on Twitter like this too. Like, I was doing my best to be respectful. It shouldn't be hard to be respectful if you're talking to someone that clearly has put a lot of time into this and understands the case very well. And yes, a little better than you, Kim. I'm not saying you're not smart, not capable, but I have a little deeper understanding of the case than you. I've given you evidence and analysis that was true, and were things that you didn't think of. Now, I'm not saying you should change your mind. Everybody should make up their own mind. But I've given you explanations for things that you didn't have before. Now you have them, and you should factor them in. So you didn't understand why the Canton police didn't find the taillight pieces. Now you have a very good explanation. And you can do what I did, go back and watch Officer Sharaf's video and look at that plow bank that's in there. You can see it. And maybe you can start to ask, so if Lucky plowed at 5:30, and Lucky's very confused about times, which he was, and Lucky says he saw an SUV at the crime scene, who was out potentially heading in that direction around 5:30? Karen Reed. And you start putting this stuff together. Now, that's not proof of anything, but be honest. Keep asking rigorous questions. And if you're talking to someone that's giving you, in a very respectful way, explanations, evidence, answers, it shouldn't be an effort to be respectful. And you don't have to be on your best behavior. Just say thank you. All right, let's go to the questions. All right, guys, my attention is all on you. I'll be looking at the questions, seeing if you guys have any comments or questions. And let me pull down. Again, thank you to Dave and Kim for having me on. They probably aren't going to want to have me on again now, but that's okay. If they do, I will go on, though, and be just as respectful. And maybe next time they'll let me ask them some questions, but whatever. So I do want to go over the medical examiner testimony. Maybe next time we'll just jump right into that. I don't know. Maybe I could try to watch it over ahead of time for you guys and then mark some highlights so I can just jump right to it. I think it's only a couple hours, the total testimony, but so again, I am working on a book on this, and the intention of the book is to be respectful to and the target audience are people on the fence. Now, by now, people in this channel know the conclusions that I've made in the case, so it's not going to surprise you that those are still the same. But there's also this will include some of the personal stories of the Yellow Cottage Tale experience, which many of you have been here along for the ride with me, and I appreciate it. So, but it's a real effort to try to get this book out before the trial. That's the real challenge. It takes a lot of work to put together a book, and not even sure if it's actually possible to do that with the trial scheduled in January. So the goal is to try to have it done by December, at least to have a Kindle version available by then, and we'll see where it goes. If anybody out there wants to help be a fact checker for me, email me, leetskev@gmail.com. If you want to read chapters and check facts or whatever, just put this out there, leetskev@gmail.com. So obviously, Kerry's going to be helping, and other people so I never name people for their own protection, but definitely some other people that are going to help me make sure all the facts are in order. So if anybody wants to do that, please just reach out to me, and I'd appreciate the help, because getting lost in the details will really slow the book down. I know all the details of the case, but what exactly, for instance, I believe the testimony is that John O'Keefe met, I'm not sure about this, but I believe he met John Jackson at Braintree Community College, but John graduated from Northeastern. So believe there was something there, but I want to make sure I got those details right. So those are the kind of questions that I want to put out just to make sure I got those details right. You make sure you get someone's names right, get their age right, and that kind of stuff. Francesca is wicked smart, no question about it. So let's see. So Lane says Jen was an incredible witness. AJ tried to bully her, but she wasn't having it. Yeah, I mean, there are some questions. Some people think it was possible that she did a little bit of damage to herself by looking so angry. But then again, I don't know. We won't know until the jury talks. But I think that anger was justified in defending yourself and your family to an obnoxious smear. So, and to a mob that's been attacking them. So it'd be interesting to see how the jury perceived it, though. I think for the most part, a jury would say, certainly I would think the moms on the jury would say, yeah, she's doing what I would have wanted to do in that situation. Talking about Jen. Kevin, we are going to the LTL media chat and bombard them. Is LTL on now? So as far as Brian, he still never replied to my email. He still never replied to the challenge. And I saw that Young Jelly had posted earlier about how when I was saying that when answering the question to Dave about grifters and about how at least they were willing to have me on their show. The thing is when I've talked to Mike Crawford in the past, it didn't have to just be on his show or on my show. I said, I will talk to you. You can come on my show. I'm willing to go on your show, or I'm willing to talk to you just on the phone. I wanted to get him the facts. I wanted to help him understand the case better. He didn't want any of that. So it's not about grifting, young little jelly. It's about trying to help you understand the case better. But you weren't interested in that. I don't know. Not really surprising, but thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Everybody that's offering, thank you. So you got my email. Feel free to reach out. That's leetskev@gmail.com. But yeah, Brian had no interest in replying to my email. And I offered him the same thing. I'll talk to you privately on the phone, Brian. Answer all your questions. Take on all your questions. Give you the stronger explanations, but listen to your opinion too. Or you can come on my show, or I'll go on your show. Or you can do it when we both stream together on the same on the channels at the same time. There's all kinds of ways to do it. Now, even though I've never disrespected him, he puts out that video where I made him look like an ass, but he's too stupid to know it. And so instead, he puts it up on his channel and he puts the title Yellow Pee-Pee Trails or something like that. Like, even if I was in the 6th grade, I would think that was a stupid joke. I mean, that's the best you got, Brian. It's almost like you're just... Do you know that you're showing the world how dumb you are? Do you know that when you put a title out like Yellow Pee-Pee Trail, like that's... You want to insult me, so the only yellow thing you could think of was pee-pee? Are you serious, dude? Why not just put a flashing neon sign behind your head on the channel that says I'm a moron? Because when you put titles up like that, that's what you're doing. I'm just trying to advise you. I'm just trying to be your media advisor. The thing is it's not a crime to be dumb, but a good strategy is to try to minimize the exposure of that lack of intelligence. That's what you want to do. So there's ways to manage it, right? So like if you're Young Jelly, you just, on your channel, you have people come on like the dumbest lawyer in the world, Bettero, and you just stand there and you just sit there and nod. See, that's his strategy for avoiding the exposure of his lack of intelligence. He doesn't have anything to add to the conversation. He just nods. I don't know. Maybe I don't watch the show regularly, but that's all I've kind of seen. I don't see any kind of intelligent questions. I mean, at least Nurse Kim and Dave were asking intelligent questions. See, that's why they were able to have me on. They have confidence. They know that they can at least ask a question, you know? Young Jelly, Brian, what can I say? You reveal yourself. So they're live viewing Jen McCabe's testimony. Is he able to add any comment to it? I mean, any analysis? Layla says, Kevin, I've always thought John O'Keefe's head hit the spoiler on Karen's back window. Is that what that's called? I was wondering what that's called, the spoiler. See, I know when I'm in the presence of smarter people than me, and Layla is one. I wondered that same question when I was out in Canton, actually, back in April for the first time, and I saw that on a vehicle, and I was like, I wonder if Karen. I wasn't sure. I was like, does Karen? That's that little edge thing on the back, right? Could that have caused that gash? I did wonder that too. I'm not saying I don't know. That's not the state's theory, so I don't know. And I guess you could. So John's 6'2". So in theory, so he would have to get that wound like that. He hits the car, and then from the impact, his head turns in a way that the gash is made on the back of his head. Could that happen? I don't know the answer to that, but I like considering it. But a question that I had when I was first considering that theory was, if his body contorted like that, what are the odds that the gash ends up being more or less perfectly horizontal? So if your body is twisting, it's got to somehow end up fully twisted so you're facing away from the vehicle. And not just that you're facing away, but your head is not tilted so that you get that really looks like perfectly horizontal gash on the back of his head. So that would be a question I have on that. But let me know what you think. Oh, Elaine, thank you much. Thank you very much, Elaine. Thanks for another great show. She says, I'm in a different time zone. Oh, where are you, Elaine? So sometimes I watch the replay. So you must be in a really different time zone. Elaine, over time here, we've had people from Norway, Australia, New Zealand, Poland, Germany, Ireland. So I would like to know where you're watching from. And we do know we have people from the West Coast too. James Hamlet always has intelligent comments and has contributed a lot to this channel. Thank you, James. He says, this is reality. The federal investigation actually solved this case. They took away the conspiracy. Why doesn't this get through to people's heads? In a way they did, right, James? They solved it in the sense that they didn't find any conspiracy. So that's proving a negative in the sense. So I don't know if it's so the feds didn't find evidence that Karen did it, nor did they look for that. But in a sense, the fact that they left no stone unturned, going way back, getting communications for a lot of people. Can't say too much more about it, but it goes way back. They did that. And as I've said here, and I'm amazed that Turtle Boy hasn't run with this yet. In the federal grand jury, Josh Levy, the U.S. attorney, strangely himself interrogating the witnesses used TB Daily News to do it. He had it up on a big easel so that the witnesses could actually make out TB Daily News on it. He was using that to question the witnesses. Stunning. If Aiden knew this, well, I haven't watched the show. Maybe he does know it and he's talked about it. Could you have ever imagined, Turtle Boy, that the U.S. attorney himself, one of the most powerful positions in the United States government, the U.S. attorney would be using your blog to question witnesses in basically the investigation of a conspiracy? That's the truth. Some people have said, don't tell Turtle Boy that because they don't want to give him the kind of rush that he's going to get out of it. But it's the truth. So we cover the truth here. Jennifer, my friend Jennifer is trying to steal people away over to LTL to help in chat. Francesca likes the spoiler theory. She says prosecutor needs to admit we don't know exactly what how the strike happened and present a couple of possibilities, the spoiler head being one of them. So Francesca likes the spoiler thing. So maybe we're starting to build some momentum for that. John had a scrape near the linear cut on his head, though, might be what they. So yes, Adam Lally did point out with his questioning the scrape, which I guess seems to indicate that he hit the ground. I don't know how conclusive that was. Hard to tell without a medical examiner too, but Miss Kara, I don't know if this is the same Kara I met outside court. Lovely person with a very interesting analysis of the evidence. She says, I think she's guilty based on the evidence that is not contested. I think she's guilty based on the evidence that is not contested. And I would be happy to discuss with anyone. And this is an important way to do it too. So for instance, just even for example, Kerry Roberts described seeing the taillight broken in missing pieces exactly the way it was shown in the Sally report. And the defense didn't challenge it. So it's not contested. The defense has not contested the GPS that shows that John's phone never went in the house. They haven't actually contested that. And the only thing they did contest was they try to come up with this weird explanation for how the clocks might not match up. So the internal clocks that are used by the programs within your phone might have been as much as 3 minutes off, they're saying. That seems incredibly unlikely to me. But Nick believed it. So, if you see, you're kind of stuck with having to believe something if it debunks your theory. So if your theory is that John went up and down stairs inside the house, then you have to find some way to explain how GPS shows that John was actually in the car driving to 34 Fairview when Rich Green says he was going up and down stairs. You have to find some way to explain that. So it kind of forces you to want to accept that clock thing, which did not sound convincing at all. And doesn't seem likely. Layla says, I'm sorry, I can't help this, Layla. Forgive me. I have a bad sense of humor. Oh, that was at 10:02, so I'm about 10 minutes behind. Let me try to get caught up. I'm just quoting you, Layla. I just clicked on it. Kara says, has anyone felt the ground in that area for large rocks embedded, if that makes sense? Yeah, I have not, but I did wonder the same thing. And it wouldn't have to be a large rock, actually. Just the rock would be a couple inches big. So what's the latest on Proctor? I think it's going to be a long legal battle for Proctor. There will be another hearing, another recommendation, and then appeals. And I think it's going to take a long time. I don't think there's any evidence that Michael Proctor did anything corrupt. Obviously, nobody agrees with those texts that he made. Is the punishment, should the punishment be destroying your career, destroying your life? I don't know. That seems kind of strong to me. So, and a waste of all that training that he's gone through. It seems to me there's got to be more useful disciplinary actions than throwing it all away. So, Pat says that he thinks John would have seen the SUV coming and turned his head. And plus, if you're even just in the process of turning your head, the impact of the strike causes your head to go back like that. But I just don't know. So I have no problem with believing that the back of John's head could hit the SUV. I've never had a problem with that. I'm not sure about the specific. The wound is so horizontal. Is the only issue I have. James says Kevin Proctor's phone didn't go to Fairview. The FBI confirmed that. So I believe that's true, but I don't know where you get the evidence for that, except for to say that they have all Proctor's information. We don't know. Do they have GPS? Do they have location data for him? I don't know that. And I don't know where, I'm not sure where you got that from, James. So, I mean, I know you can deduce it if you believe that they had that information. The fact that it wasn't reported in trial tells us that he didn't go to Fairview. But I never thought Michael Proctor went to Fairview, because for Michael Proctor to go to Fairview that day would mean that all the other troopers are in on it and they all lied, because they obviously know who he is. They all work out of the Norfolk DA's office. So that just seems incredibly likely. Why are all these people going to throw away their careers? No way. Levy probably didn't know what a slime ball TB was at the time. No, he knew at the time of this that this was happening. He certainly knew this was going on while Turtle Boy was hounding Jen McCabe at her Daughters Lacrosse game at the same time. So he knew. Levy is media savvy. That's why he does all those press conferences. There is going to be a trial for Turtle Boy. We'll see what happens. You get one or two Turtle Riders onto the jury, but there's definitely going to be a trial. Jim McNutty says the lack of bleeding on the arm leads him to think that it was done post-mortem. Yeah, but the other thing, Jimmy, is that those wounds are shallow. They're shallow abrasions. So I don't think they would bleed much. And I don't, the extreme cold might have affected that too. So Jimmy is saying that the head bled a lot and the arm wasn't bleeding. But I think, again, Jimmy, I think it's just because it's shallow abrasions. But he's saying that it happened at 5:23 a.m. when Karen went back. So that again, I think I like toying with a good theory. And that's what I've done for the whole case is you throw theories out there and then you shoot them down yourself. So there's nothing wrong with throwing a theory out. Seems unlikely to me. How would Karen have created those wounds on John when she went back? So that seems unlikely to me, but YT3 says the biggest piece of evidence is her admitting she hit him. See, I don't really agree with that, but that's, we're all entitled to our opinions. I'm always been dubious of that because there's no recording of it. It comes from witness statements and we don't know what she meant. We don't know if she asked it with a question. And so I'm much more comfortable. I'm very uncomfortable with any witness statements that are not directly supported by evidence, by physical evidence. So, with some exceptions, like I do believe when Kerry Roberts testified that Karen said, I hit him and maybe he was hit by a plow. No, I'm sorry. She said John's dead and maybe he was hit by a plow. But what supports that is that then right after that, she called the police station and then called the hospital to see if anybody had been hurt. So that really confirms that what she was saying was likely true. And then when you take that factoring that she had no motive, she didn't know Jen McCabe or the Alberts. I mean, she knew them. She only met Jen McCabe once. I don't think she'd ever met the Alberts. And the defense didn't challenge her. So to me, that ends up being pretty powerful testimony. Yeah, the Microvots video was, though he has the talent to make those things, and I wish that I did too, but yeah, it's disturbing that people have no sense of conscience about accusing. It's really disturbing that people have no sense of conscience about accusing people of being part of a murder and knowing that that'll destroy their lives and giving no thought at all about the rightness or wrongness of that or what the effect might be. They give no thought at all that. That bothers me. Jimmy says, I think Karen threw the glass at John. I don't believe that. And the reason other people have brought this up, in fact, the ARCA guys thought that. This is, those ARCA guys obviously are PhDs, qualified scientists, blah, blah, blah. But common sense tells us that it's super unlikely that he threw the glass for the simple reason that the glass was found with him, with his body. Elaine is hoping to come to Massachusetts to support during the next trial. Well, that'll be really cool. And maybe if I go up at all or down from here to Dedham for the trial, I don't know that I will be, but if I do get to meet you, I don't know where you're coming from though, Elaine. If you said I missed it. Lily needs to see the timeline. You want to see the old timeline that we always pull in here? I can pull it in easily enough. All right, hold on a second. This timeline is bulletproof. And is Chick from the Bricks here tonight? I don't think I've seen her. But I think she'll be happy to know that if they opt to use it, a lot of people are going to see this timeline. A lot of people. And it's going to be very influenced. Very influential. All right. Here's the timeline. Has anyone found the link between Levy and William Reed? I mean, no, not that I know of. I've heard the speculation about it. And I want to, nothing that is substantiated in any way to me. So, don't know. No, Jay, that's you're exaggerating that. That was you're all right. So Jay Ray says, well, to be fair, the DA's office via Lowy also said Proctor went to 34 Fairview at the arraignment. You can't just pluck something out of the air that is just kind of. I don't remember seeing that from Lowy. I think what I saw was I think what you might be talking about, Jay Ray, is that Trooper Garino at some point had said in his report that Trooper Proctor collected this from the scene, but he wasn't. He's writing a report. He's not trying to write it literally, thinking this is going to be dissected later on, because he doesn't know when. He wasn't with Proctor on. He wasn't. Trooper Garino wasn't called in on the 29th, so it's just an errant thing that he puts in a report. He may have thought that Trooper Proctor was there. He's not considering it to be, while he's writing it, an important thing. So, and I never heard anything about Lally saying that Proctor went to Fairview. So no, Proctor didn't go to 34 Fairview. It's beyond really any serious question at this point. I mean, if you really need me to go into it more, I guess I can. But so there were 7 members of the CERT team there. None of them saw Proctor. There were Lieutenant Tully and possibly some other cops that were unidentified that were there. Nobody saw Michael Proctor there. Michael Proctor was with Yuri Buchanan the entire day. Yuri Buchanan, because of the blizzard, they were in Yuri's truck. And Yuri said they didn't go there. So how many people have to be lying here? Michael Morrissey, listen, is he came, they have a press conference that said he didn't go there. Is he really likely to lie? I don't know anything about Michael Morrissey. I'm annoyed with him that he didn't give Adam Lally more resources. But beyond that, just look at someone's self-interest. Is it in his self-interest to lie about Michael Proctor going there when it's going to be debunked? And it seems pretty obvious that the feds would have they dug deep into Michael Proctor's phone and his communications and presumably his location data, though we don't know about that. But there's just so much evidence that Michael Proctor didn't go there that it's not rational to believe that he did. I'm sorry. It's just true. There's almost zero blood on the sleeve because they were shallow abrasions, Jimmy. Shallow abrasions. Shallow abrasions don't bleed. Mark says the prosecution has to really hammer the timeline. Yep. John's GPS, geolocation data. Yep. Text stream and celebrate. Yep. I don't know whether the glass hurt John, Jimmy, actually. So it didn't do anything major to him, but he did have 2 scratches on his face. That could have come from John's fingernail. That could have come from a piece of glass. I don't know. But as far as we know, there were no injuries from the glass. So Tony says that the heavy nature of the glass, that it bounced into the yard. Maybe. But the best explanation is that it was in John's hand because that it ended up with his body. What are the odds if that glass struck something and bounced that it would end up John, who went 15 feet to end up where he did? What are the odds that the glass would strike the car and bounce in the same direction and end up in the same spot? Very, very thin. So the best explanation is that it was in his hand, and his hand hit that spot where the dent is, or the glass hit the spot. I think more likely the hand, because that explains the bruise on the right hand. And it broke, and that's why there were pieces inside found on top of the bumper. And then the glass is still in his hand as that force is put onto him and he's launched. So that glass stayed with him. So I think the best explanation, and Kara did some work on this too, is that the best explanation for those abrasions on John's arm is that the elbow is bent. And if you look closely, she did a good job of showing this with photos. There are the pattern of lines on the sections of taillight that, especially if your arm was bent like this, it looks like it would make more or less exactly what you see on his arm. Now, unfortunately, I thought that the prosecution was going to have that explained. Their medical experts explain that, or do have someone come in and match up those injuries. I would have bet anything that they were going to do that, and they didn't. So I think but I don't think it's because they don't match up. I think it's just more inadequacy of the prosecution. Hopefully they were able to do that in this second case. The scratches on the arm are not from the glass. I feel confident saying that. So, Jimmy, this theory that you have that John was bent over picking up glass pieces, I think that was originally my theory. I came up with that back in September, and I had a video made along those lines because I was trying to understand. I was under the belief that John's head had been struck by the car and by the taillight. And I couldn't understand how his head could be struck by a part of the car, but his shoulder or his back were not. That made no sense to me, or his legs or something like that. But I don't think that that's the case. It turns out that we spent a long time in many ways trying to figure out where exactly John was found and what could have caused that head injury. And it seems like, it may not be fully satisfying, but the best answer is the frozen ground. Yeah, no, okay, JJ is talking about the Proctor thing, but that's we're reading into things that why would Proctor know exactly? I mean, it's a way of describing something that's innocent at the time. He probably, whether he assumed that Michael Proctor went there that day, but didn't realize at the time that it was not till the next day that Michael Proctor went there. Isn't that more likely, J. Ray? I mean, it's not like Michael Proctor. It's not like Adam Lally interviewed Michael Proctor and said back then and said, "What day did you go to 34 Fairview?" It's not how it works. So you're writing these reports and you're just doing your best to compile all this information. And so sometimes you have an assumption. And it's just, we know the old expression, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. But it's just human. There's going to be some of this. And nobody was looking at this with the eye towards an idea that Michael Proctor might have been planting taillight pieces there. So they wouldn't have thought of that back then. But it was not meant to say that he knew. Adam Lally wasn't there. There's no document there's no document where Michael Proctor says he was there, and no one saw him there. So those are just little things that you can't read too much into. Layla says, "This is stressful. Do you have any seats at the bar? I need a drink." Well, my bar owning days are over. But if I still owned a bar and was still operating a bar, we would save a seat for you. So Francesca says this is an interesting problem we're talking about. So the cops need to drive the routes at 12:30, and Alexis like hers to show how she made it to John's in 4.5 minutes. I don't know what is the best way to demonstrate this for a jury, right? And I don't think you can have a cop go out there and I don't know, maybe you could, but I don't. I guess you'd have to have a cop go out there because you're breaking the speed limit. Have the police go out and give an escort to somebody driving a Lexus. I guess. I don't know. Is that possible? That seems unlikely to me. But to me, if you just look at Google Maps and it gives you a time estimate, but that's based on an average speed of 25 miles an hour. But if you change the speed to 35 miles an hour, it takes 4 minutes. I think it was 4 minutes and 40 seconds. That's at 35 miles an hour. So if you make it 37 miles an hour average speed. Now it's average speed. So that means to have an average speed doing that, knowing there are some turns and there are some stop signs on Cedar Crest, or depending, we don't know what route you took. So that would have to be where she goes through the stop signs kind of quickly, maybe just slows down at them, and on the long stretches of road, punches it up to 50 miles an hour or something like that. But we've had people try it. Carrie tried it, and she did it in 4 minutes and a few seconds. And she tried it around that. She didn't, I don't think she tried it in a Lexus, but that shouldn't matter. Oh, James, that's a really good idea. James said she was frantically clearing the snow off his face, and that might be where the scratches were made. That's a really, really, really good idea. That was at 10:27, so I'm only 6 minutes behind. Let me see if I can get caught. That's a great idea. No, the GPS shows that John was not in the house. So I can explain the GPS a little bit. So when you have GPS, it locates you within a margin of error. And it seems that the normal margin of error is like 15 feet, but actually I think it can be even less than that if you have enough satellites. And so I talked to someone who does drones, and when he's using drones to navigate by satellite, it'll tell him exactly how many satellites that are sending signals that drone is picking up. So I'm not talking about a military drone. I'm talking about just an ordinary drone. And he'll say, for instance, I'd look at it and it's picking up signal from 17 satellites. So there's a lot of satellites up there sending out GPS signal. And so depending on how strong the signal is coming in, that affects that margin of error. Now, if you're in the house, you're going to have a weaker signal. So you might turn on your GPS and it shows, and it doesn't know what room you're in, or it may not even know that you're in the house, or it just knows you're nearby. But the strength of signal is also determined with every bit of information that's coming in. So that margin of error is always known. So what happened with John was the margin of error was 15 feet for most of that time. But there was a 2-second period. There was a 2-second period when the margin of error expanded to include the house, meaning the signal got weak enough. So what LTL doesn't understand is that there's only a 2-second period, only 2 seconds, when the margin of error expanded enough to include the house. So in theory, that's the only 2 seconds within which John could have got into the house. Now, to believe that, you'd have to believe that he flew into the house, went up and down stairs, and flew back out unconscious and ended up on top of his phone. But even then, it still doesn't mean he could have done that or went in the house, because there was never a time when the GPS signal picked up John moving in the direction of the house. So he would have been walking towards the driveway, right? There was never a point where they picked him up doing that. He was found. The last coordinates where he was found was where Karen dropped him off. So he never went very more than a few feet. J. Ray, I'm not saying that I believe Proctor was there on 129. I'm just saying that some of the facts of the case. Well, see, that's the thing is you always have to look at the abundance of data and abundance of facts to make these determinations. And it doesn't mean that that's so the defense team is always going to try to, this is the problem here is people trying to exploit these things, right? So in isolating some little snippet there in a report that makes it seem like that Proctor was at the crime scene, that's doing a disservice because when you look at the overall evidence, it's clear that he wasn't. So to just isolate one little fact is really no different than trying to look at Jen's phone and isolate this errant piece of data that says that Karen searched for how long to die in the cold at 2:20. That Jen searched for how long to die at the cold at 2:27. The evidence is overwhelming against that. There are errant pieces of evidence and data in trials that you don't want to add too much weight to when they're just little outlier things. Another example would be the taillight piece that was found near the fire hydrant. That's 30 feet from where John was found. That does not mean that the point of impact was parallel to that fire hydrant and that John flew 30 feet in the air. No, it's just an outlier piece of information that doesn't fit the overall pattern. Anna, I'm not sure who she's saying this to. You're going to be unhappy with the results of the trial if you just make up facts that suit your conclusion. Well, I'm not sure if you're talking to me or to somebody else, but we don't know what the results of the trial will be, obviously. And yeah, it's important not to do that. It's important not to just cherry pick little facts. So I would say she may be talking to J. Ray, not disrespectfully or anything, but just if you're cherry picking some little piece of a report that was not anybody that had knowledge of where Proctor was at the specific day or moment. So somebody also recently did some testing with Alexis and sent me the examples to show that it was actually impossible, they say, for when Karen backed into John's SUV, his Traverse, that the bumper would have prevented the taillight from striking. I don't know that that's true. They sent me some video to show it, but that will be something that will come out later. I think that is going to come out in the second trial. Yeah, I mean, Karen's facts have changed big time. Now, she now says that she dropped John off at the driveway. Nobody saw that happen. Nobody saw John get out of the car, and that she saw him walk into the house. She never said that before. It was something she didn't say until this last summer. But I suppose you could say maybe she went through regressive hypnosis and the memory was recalled. Who knows? I know it's crazy for anybody to think the GPS showed John in the house. This is, people get, not you guys, but some people get mad at me for, what's the word? They think that I'm selectively choosing the pieces of evidence that I want to believe, and I should respect that they're things. Well, it depends what you're asking me to believe. If you're asking me to believe that John's phone went in the house, no, it didn't. And I don't really consider that to be opinion. I consider that to be a fact that John's phone never went in that house. That's a fact. Now, it's possible John dropped his phone and went in the house, right? Theoretically, it's possible. Seems very unlikely, but yeah, John's alter ego is apparently the Flash. Yeah. Can't say you don't. Yeah, yeah. There's no evidence Proctor. There's no. See, the thing is I don't know Michael Proctor. All right, but I determined almost a year ago that he didn't plant evidence. Not because I know Michael Proctor and say, "Wow, he's a stand-up guy." I don't know him, and I don't automatically trust police. But the opportunity to get at that taillight and get those taillight pieces and bury them 3 feet down into the snow was not there. It's extremely unlikely that could happen. And then when you compile that with all the other very unlikely things, such as John not going in the house despite not having his phone, the idea of Matt and Jen going home, knowing that the plan was to put John out to die on the lawn, even just the idea of the conspirators putting John out on their own lawn. All this stuff is so incredibly unlikely that it's like a 1 in a billion chance for a conspiracy to even be possible here. You're getting into quantum mathematical numbers. J. Ray, don't. I know it's hard to make your point in chat, so I apologize if we're misunderstanding your point. It's okay. We're not disrespecting you in any way, and it is. I do admit that it's hard to argue what you're saying in chat. So I can never get caught up. So let's see, where am I? I'm 4 minutes behind, but in the chat. So Kevin, I'll take a virtual drink. Yeah, man, that would be great if we could do that. We need the Matrix to be born so we can have virtual drinks. It's, I feel like with AI, it's just around the corner, right? We need that Matrix to come on. Wow, Kara's got some serious math shit going on up there. Damn. We got some math people here. Miss Kara. All right, so this is a good point. So Jennifer is monitoring Brian's channel, and they're saying, according to her, that the colony, I don't know what that is, was involved in a drug dealing, and that John turned him in. So I think you meant Colin. I think that was wrapped. So I think you going with the whole drug dealing thing. But this is one of the reasons. So we try to figure out, why would Karen bring this up? She goes out of her way to invite herself out to dinner with these EI people. She hasn't done an interview with the media in a year. She chooses this friendly people, and she goes out and does an interview with them. And what seems to be on her mind most is to say that she had nothing to do with the drug dealing story. Why would she put that out there? Because nobody's been talking about this. It never even got that much traction when I reported it last year. So why is she bringing it up now? Well, one possibility is that it's a clever way of making the story stick again. That's what I mentioned this last week. I said it's possible that she's doing. It was like with Turtle Boy. He said, he goes, is it true that Kevin from Yellow Cottage is faking cancer? And so later on, he can say, "Oh, I never said Kevin was faking cancer. I just asked a question." But when he asked that question like a dog whistle, all of a sudden everybody was accusing me of faking cancer. Is Karen cleverly doing the same thing? Well, I never said Colin was dealing drugs, but he gets everybody talking about it. And Brian, being very slow, ran with it. But Brian seems to be someone that's in regular communication with Karen. So looks like she's using him now to get that out. Just like I allege without evidence, but I believe that she used Sean on this channel last year. So I am saying that there seems to be a pattern again repeating herself, that this time she's using Brian. Oh, I actually reached the end of chat. I actually got caught up. All right. So, been on for almost 3 hours now. So, we'll take out one more question and we'll call it a night. And I got to get up at 7 o'clock to get started on that book. And again, anybody that wants to help out with the fact checking and stuff like that, reach out to me at leitskev@gmail.com. LEITSKEV@gmail.com. Anybody who is a member that wants to join us in the Discord, please do. Oh, let me go to the Discord because I always go there to make sure no one has any messages. And looks like not the case. So, but if you're interested in joining our Discord, it's just a small new community. Jennifer's there. And you're welcome, Jimmy. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Let's take down this timeline, which I'm not going to go over because I've been over it so many times here that people don't want to hear it from me for sure. So I'm working on a series for the channel that's a lot of hard work. Episode 1 is almost done, but it's going to be like a 12-part series that the idea is to argue two people on the fence. My position and most of you here, your position on this case. And I have a professional editor. I can do video editing myself, just not at a professional level. So I wrote the narration, narrated, made clips for it, and brought in a bunch of clips from the trial and other things. And it's largely ready to go, but now I have to get it into the hands of the professional editor to make it look much better. But it looks good enough that it's still going to look better than a regular episode of Yellowtails. You don't even see this room in it at all. For those who want something different. Okay, guys. So again, thank you very much for being here. Let me just make sure there was no other notes that I had to go through. So we do want to get to that medical examiner testimony on the next show. I haven't had, because I'm working so hard on the book and on the documentary stuff, that I haven't had time to prepare for these shows. So I just kind of come on and do something like I did tonight, like the reaction video. So, but good night, everybody. Thank you, Sailboat Wolf, and for the people that made contributions. It's very much appreciated. So Andy, Carrie, and Elaine, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And so we'll